All right. Welcome, everybody. Sunday morning at 9 a.m. Here we are at Hash Church 4.0, episode 7. Going to do a few things here real quick and send out the links. Always important, always important. We'll get the chatters in here. Take care of them first. We will accept Etienne and Johnny fucking B to the room. And I think, just like that, we are a go. What's going on, gentlemen?
Morning.
Good morning.
Welcome back from Mexico, John.
Fuck yeah. How are you guys?
Doing good, brother. Doing good.
I'm here for an hour to say hello, and I'm going to go have breakfast with Rob Clark because he's in town. So
Clark's in town.
Nice. I heard it was his birthday. So happy belated birthday to Rob Clark. I had to FaceTime with him a couple of weeks ago, maybe 2 or 3 weeks ago. And he invited me down to kind of go down to California and hang out and see everyone. I also spoke with Ian Davidson the other day. I don't know if you were there. He was out there with Mojave and Todd and Rob and Sam, and hopefully that was a nice time as well. I wish I was in a position to come down and hang out.
You are. You're great.
Nice.
well, you are missed, but I will convey your love and appreciation as always.
Etienne,
Give thanks, brother.
grab the phone, go live, and then go boom. Just do a FaceTime, and he's there. Are we live?
That's what happened the other day. I was hanging out with Amir, and he just called Rob up on FaceTime, and so it was nice to get that little bit of FaceTime.
I have it.
Been a while.
I will try to see what I can do.
I will.
Well, no stress either way. Sometimes, Rob is more.
Yeah, it's all in his mood.
On the down low. Exactly. It's on the down low. Doesn't always need to be live. But hey, hello everybody out there in internet land. We got about 67 people so far that have popped in at 9:01. We got Dirty Grows and William Wonder and Puget Sound, and John Maddox, Tara Lee's in the house. We got Bingo Lombardi, Pembina River, BBNF guy, Uncle Buck, and a couple of Steves. Potent Ponics is in Thailand right now. Steve, who recently sent me this beautiful little Hasher hoodie and hat. Got to give him a shout out. Hashhead Outfitters over on Instagram. Hashhead Outfitters on .com. Hashheadoutfitters.com.
I didn't get a hat.
Do 20 different things at a time.
Well,
all right. Dr. Mark in the house. Mr. Wade Laughter in the house. Beautiful, beautiful. Sunday morning, familiar faces. I guess Sunday afternoon for Dr. Mark. Sunday morning for the rest of the West Coast boys and girls.
hey, I haven't done a dab in 11 days.
Jesus, Johnny.
One ashtray, right?
I might have to. I was waiting. I might have to go grab the kid.
I'm sorry,
Do you have a
what?
preference which ashtray?
Yeah.
I don't. I could have 2. It's okay.
We have 2.
Sorry.
I'll take 2.
It's all good, Wade. So, John, what is the first thing you're going to smoke on in 11 days? I bet you selected it.
Sitting on the counter, I'll just go grab it. I think it's some wedding cake live rosin from Squish. Yeah, it's what I smelled. I was like, oh, I'm gonna wait for Hash Church. There's no point. I thought about it this morning, and I was like, I really just want to do my first dab with you guys.
We appreciate that. Johnny, you just spent like a week and a half with Tony Robbins in Mexico, doing the Tony Robbins thing and hanging out with influential people and getting all inspired. So that's where Johnny B's been for the last week and a half.
They weren't into dabbing? Really, Johnny?
There's no dabbing, but I did meet a lot of people on plant therapy. I met people who do a lot of ayahuasca and stuff like that. We talked about how they're getting to regenerative healing and natural health. in dealing with different energies when it comes to being able to enlighten ourselves. So it was very much a trip of fulfillment and happiness, education with yourself, and learning those great things and how we kind of grow forward, right? It's all about growth. It's all about understanding and how we can kind of keep moving forward in what we do here as a team. It's how we as a cannabis community is. We join each other together in order to keep growing and look at our future, look at that next 100 years and what we can do for the future. And yeah, you know, plant medicine is the key here, guys, and we're part of that. We're part of that push and keeping it real.
Oh boy, the link's not working for Colin. I don't know why.
Well, sometimes those links don't work, but we send him another link and Colin jumps in.
Isn't he a
That's
vessel of
true.
light?
I was having some trouble finding the link for today's meeting until I realized that my email server stacks emails and I have to thread through the old ones in order to find the one that's relevant to today. So thank you, Marcus.
Totally.
You did send the right link. It just took me a few minutes to find it.
I think
Bless
it's
you.
Awesome. Well, I never mind sending it again, that's for sure. I just resent it out to the whole group. And yeah, welcome to Nick is in the house as well. How you feeling, Nick? I know you were feeling a little under the weather there. You feeling a little bit better today?
Yeah, I'm actually feeling okay. It was just 3 weeks of hand harvesting, multiple 100 acres was just wearing down. So,
Those 16-hour days harvesting hemp, huh?
yep.
Is that for cannabinoid content or
For all of the above.
all of the above?
Yeah, doing a bunch of new trials on different processing methods and harvesting methods and growing methods to maximize aromatic content as well as cannabinoid content. So
that sounds awesome, Nick.
yeah, it's good fun.
That sounds really awesome. I've never met you before, so it's nice to meet you.
Likewise, John.
Yeah.
Oh, you guys have never met each other before?
Nope.
He opened up this awesomeness when he was telling me. I was like, hey, lunch.
Well,
John,
Johnny
what's
B's
your?
on, go ahead.
Sorry, John. What's your story with the group?
My story with my group.
No, with everybody here. So I don't know everyone. I'm sort of new to this.
I'm a cannabis accelerator, likes to help people with the industry. I've been involved with the industry for a very long time. I worked with Dr. Paul Hornby in the very beginning and taught me how to actually decarboxylate cannabis to bind the receptors, and became that published study on natural cannabis and pain control, 2007, 2008. And from there, I met all these lovely people over time because of the passion with the plant. And we connected with Mark on a beautiful plane ride one time, come back in 2012. And we just realized how much we love this industry and helping others. And like everybody here, we all connected from the heart with the plant. And it's just been my life, it's my passion. Like what I heard you talking, sounds like just the same thing. And you know what? Here we are together as a team, taking it to that next level to help educate others. Pretty awesome. Appreciate you, Nick. And it's nice to finally meet you.
Likewise.
Now I have to go get my bong with a torch and do a dab with you guys back in a minute.
Yeah, Johnny's just lost like 90 pounds. So John was a little bit heavier, and first of all, John didn't even get into the tip of his story. He fell like 30 feet off of a scissor lift like 20 years ago and broke like most of the bones in his body, smashed his head on the second floor coming down as he was spiraling off the scissor lift, and shattered his jaw and broke his neck and broke his back and shattered his arm and shattered the whole side of his body.
Oh God.
And was completely addicted to pills. He was a zombie. He used to carry around this big cooler, and in it were all these pill bottles of oxycodone and all these other horrible things that he was taking. And he was just a full zombie. And he was one of these guys that had like signs out in front of his house because he was like not suing workers' compensation, but they were just really trying to fuck him over huge. So he had that whole thing going on. And eventually he got onto cannabinoids and essential amino acids, and like linked up with Dr. Paul Hornby and got off all of these drugs. And John is a super unique character, but he is the most incredible, amazing guy in the sense that his drive and his discipline is kind of second to none when you really get to know him. He's helped build this company, Medtainer, without even owning it. I think most people thought he owned the company, the way he put the energy into it and the way he sold that product. And just an overall fucking awesome dude, good guy, not a victim at all, although he could be. He could easily be, oh, I'm a victim, poor me, woe is me, but he's more like, fuck this, I just got to get better. And then honestly, since he broke like almost every bone in his body, he's probably been in another 3 or 4 accidents. It was less than months ago he got T-boned by a truck. He even has video footage of this truck just going like 100 kilometers an hour and smoking him and flipping him upside down into a ditch. Like it's pretty wild, dude. You kind of can't even believe what Johnny B's been through, but here he is. He's in our group, and we love him.
Life has been happening for me, not to me. That's the way you gotta look at it. All right, that's what
I like that attitude.
20% of the problem, 80% of the solution. And that's how we move forward in life, because we all have stories and we all go through tough times. Weak people make weak times, right? Weak times make weak people. Strong people make strong times. Strong people make great fucking times. And that's why we're all here making great times in life. Because everybody here has a unique, heroic identity of what they've done in life and where they're going, which makes it just so much more rewarding of being able to connect with everybody to push them to that next level. And here we help inspire people to do what they need to do for themselves. And that's why you guys are all amazing. And I love you all. Thank you, Mark.
Love you too. Remember, everybody falls. You know, it's how you get up, right?
There you go, Etienne.
And I'm around everybody here as everybody who stands straight back up again and keeps walking right back into that wall, because I love you all.
That's it, man. That's it. I want to welcome Julie. Julie's in the house from Cannareps. Cannareps is a really cool local company that's, kind of just teaching bud tenders and people alike about the sommelier effects. Actually, Julie, you're going to want to link up with Nick. Because Nick is really a sensory scientist, and what you're doing at Cannareps and teaching people about the genetics and where they come from and the volatile organic compounds. There's no one that I know that knows more about that than Nick in regards to, volatile compounds we in the cannabis industry haven't even been talking about for the last 20 years. He's been studying in the hops industry as well as the cannabis industry, and just has a really beautiful way of putting it. I'm hoping Dr. Mark Lewis is going to come in from NAPRO today as well. He posted a really cool article recently on, is the limonene in your cannabis the same as the limonene in your botanical terpenes? And it's an article that they posted on LinkedIn under NAPRO, if anyone wants to go check that out. But it really got me thinking, like, I want to get Nick and Mark in here, as well as Dr. Mark and some of the other characters that are around, and kind of open up this conversation, because to me, there's the least said about it. And, I just love the idea of this sort of, on one side, we call it the sommelier aspect. On the other side, Nick's more calling it the sensory science, which is really, really what it is. So introduce both of you guys to one another.
Yeah, I'm excited for this because I've read some of his articles, and I'm really interested in discussing it more. And I think it's important to note that they're not different things. They're different sides of the same coin. Sommelier aspect is more curating it to what the individual is after, and the sensory science of it is analyzing what's in there and analyzing people's reaction to it and trying to understand what drives the experience. So it's one is sort of experience focused and customer facing, and the other is much more about understanding the interactions between people's sort of sensory or the organoleptic properties or organoleptic senses that they have, and what they derive from the material. So it's exciting.
Yeah, I really appreciate that. I think, what this all stemmed from, at least for me, was a drive for quality, because, any seasoned cannabis consumer is going to want to fine tune and explore all the different nuances that cannabis can offer. And I got really frustrated during legalization, seeing cannabis menus being displayed as THC percentage, maybe CBD percentage, and then the brand, and then the cost. So it just trained the industry to think, hey, you know what? So potency equals value. And that's what people are always driven by value. And so as this training, this market training happened, it drove the industry to really push for high potency product. But then, you know, you forget about the flavor experience, which is the sensory experience. And, you know, as I was really getting deeper and deeper into this, I wanted to stimulate a discussion about what quality is. And it really starts with input, right? Like what Marcus and everyone here is talking about. So it's the cultivar first, right? How did the breeder or the flower itself get to a particular point where the flavor is so exceptional that, and then it gets cultivated? What are the inputs in the cultivation process that leads to better quality? And then that leads to a better sensory experience, whether that is the smell, the taste, right? And then even the touch. For me, I love it when I roll up a joint and it's so sticky that the joint just sticks to itself and it rolls to itself. Like that's an indication of quality to me, but I wanted to open it up to this, you know, group of experts here and talk about that definition, because, you know, I think if we can inspire and encourage the general market to say, hey, you know what, it's not just driving for high potency products, but it's also, you know, all the things that make this particular product, especially for cannabis flower, so unique. And then this all drives down to, you know, what the trichome and what hash and all the derivatives that you can make out of it. But it starts off with the plant. So that's why I'm here today. Thank you, Marcus. Thank you, Nick.
Well, thank you. When you talk about quality, that's I think it's a really interesting. I think that's, sorry, I just opened the YouTube link. That's a really interesting distinction, because one of the things that I worked on a lot was sort of differentiating quality from character, because quality is to me defined by, you know, terms like HACCP, so like, you know, hazard analysis and critical control points, where there's no danger to the consumer, that it's meeting certain standards that have been set, so that it's like, you know, it is what it says on the label. Like it does have the cannabinoid content that it claims. There's no pesticides or any harmful factor or any harmful things like that. It's got a good shelf life. There's no mold or mycotoxins or aflatoxins, all those aspects. Whereas character is much more of the sort of descriptive aspect of it. So this is like, yes, this meets our quality standards. This is good enough for consumers to have. It's at the right moisture level. It's not going to rot or anything like that. But when we talk about character, that's more of a descriptive analysis of what is in the material, what is the experience the user might derive from that, so that we know all the components of it and what it smells like, what it feels like, what it looks like. And I think it's important to consider both, because they are linked, but I think that it's also important to differentiate them, especially as the industry matures. So good quality for me is much more about, you know, meeting certain standards that we've set as an industry, which is one of the reasons that I do like the idea of regulation just for consumer protection. I think that you need to have people that know what they're doing on those regulatory bodies, and are familiar with the product, rather than just sort of abstract individuals. But I think that it is very important to distinguish sort of the descriptors of the material from the from quality components, I guess. And I'm not trying to you know, sort of assert my vision, but I think it's an important discussion to have.
Well, it's extremely important, because here we are in California. We're 4 years in with our head up our ass, because the Department of Cannabis Control can't seem to understand that cannabis is an unstable product. And so they're not dealing with, you know, air quality control inside of packages. So we're dealing with oxygenation, which, as we know, is causing, you know, anaerobic decarboxylation and all kinds of problems that are inherent. They're not keeping it refrigerated, so it's stable. what like they do with alcohol and other products. So just their inherent, because the majority of these people are policy wonks and not actually users of cannabis. This is one of the major reasons why California cannabis is struggling right now, is because they can get better, fresher product from their local plug than this decaying, anaerobic decomposed cannabis that is oxidized red. If it's 3, as 6 or 9 months old, it changes chemically because of the oxygenation trapped inside. And if they were actually using something like combinations of nitrogen and CO2 injection into the flower, into the concentrate to stabilize it so that oxygenation doesn't continue to happen, I think California consumers would find a more stable product available to them, closer to the representation on the vine than whatever the fuck they're getting in the end. And I want to say, fuck pre-roll cones. Thank you.
Well, one thing I wanted to point out is I think, as we became, domestic producers and not importers of the product, this is the conversation I had last week with Rob Clark and Mojave, was we historically are still trained that, these feelings are the driving factor from this era, that where we didn't really understand what terpene profile was because we were importing it. And by the time it got to us, we didn't really know these flavors or never experienced them until really till we started producing it here in the States. And we got, like you pointed out, Etienne, fresh cannabis. And with that, we have these profiles that we had never really seen before. And what's really fascinating is as we go forward into production, like Nick just beautifully, pointed out, and others, we don't really have a standard for what should happen during growth, in the middle of growth, and when post harvest happens. There's no, everyone has their own SOPs and their own version of what should happen, and that creates a lot of holes, and it creates a vernacular that we all can't stand on, right? So with that, there's so many things, like you said, there's no, you just put it in whatever jar, there's headroom, there's that chemistry that's happening all the way up until you finally stuff it in your bowl or vaporize it, whatever your use case is chemistry is happening, and there's a lot of things that we have yet to agree on that need to happen to make sure that product or that particular varietal is represented from the moment that people like us see it, which is super fresh and really volatile and lots of amazing flavors and tastes and smells. But to your point, there's broken systems that are jammed in between all of all these things that we're talking about that make all of this stuff even more difficult, because we have standards that once it leaves the farm, what are their standards, right? Until it gets to the distro, not even distro, into the retail shop. So I think there's just a lot to talk about before we even get to cultivation, because there's psychology, there's a lot of years of misinformation, and I think that's what we're talking about here, is trying to demystify a lot of those things that we just quite frankly don't truly understand.
Right. What I wanted to say is, even taking a step behind that, even before cultivation, is really looking at all the work that the breeders have done to create a variety that is stable, that is distinguishable. Because when we're looking at quality, we have to compare quality for within what that variety is supposed to express, like, not having a standard. Like, of course cultivators are not going to have a standard way of growing all flowers, right? But I think having a true understanding of what a particular cultivar and its typical attributes should be, and looking at, okay, well, let's compare it to that, right? And so, and the reason why this triggered me was because I smoked a GMO, right? But I got no garlic, I got some mushroom, and I didn't really get the onion. I got more dirt and mushroom, and I'm thinking, okay, the breeder that created GMO put the word garlic first. So I'm assuming, the flavor connection to garlic should really be there. And I'm so glad that there's, a lot of scientists here, because I've also been in grow rooms where, yes, particular aromas are so pronounced at the beginning in the grow stage, right? But then by the time it gets packaged and shipped out, I wonder, what volatiles have left. And I want to go beyond terpenes. Nick, I have a question for you about esters and thiols, because the aroma of skunk and the aroma of cheese, that's not a combination of terpenes. That is a combination of other chemical compounds, right?
Yeah, those so the cheese, garlic, onion are typically thiols and thioates, as well as some of the components that are associated with diesel and gas. You get some of the tridecanes and the didecanes and some of those volatile sort of components that are more sort of ethereal and more solventy, and those in conjunction with those thioates give the impression of some of the gassy notes. And it's really interesting what you're saying about variety, because I have a slightly different take on it, and that is that. And this is going to be a little bit of a long-winded thing. So I think variety and the breeder's intentions are very important. But there's two aspects to consider. Is that one, the breeder bred this in their particular microenvironment and their particular growing system, and they arrived at this final chemovar. This is what it expressed in their system. Cannabis has a tremendously strong G by E sort of interaction, genetics by environment, that depending on how it's grown, where it's grown, how it's treated, it will express different components. Then you have the whole aspect of harvest time. When you mentioned this earlier, like these volatiles early in the growth period will smell like one thing, and then later on will smell like another. And rather than that be sort of a limiting factor, I think that's sort of an expansive opportunity for growers to express what they want to come out of that particular varietal. And I think that's really fun. And rather than sort of limiting ourselves to like, these are the narrow boundaries that GMO must express, or these are the narrow boundaries that grape ape might express, or so on and so forth. You can choose to harvest at different times to get different expressions of that material, of that plant. And I think that's a beautiful thing, because I tend to favor, rather than the heavy onion, garlic, gas, cheese, I tend to favor the much fruitier, lighter esters and some of the light tropical fruit thiols early on, and the terpenes obviously as well, early on in the process, rather than the heavier later sort of, I guess people have described it as heady, but the very garlicky, cheesy notes. And so I think it's important to give growers especially, and then through growers, consumers, the opportunity to experience the plants at different stages of ripeness, because that expands the ability to provide different experiences for people. Now, you can go the opposite direction, which is that you can say, this is what the microenvironment that you want to grow this variety in. And we're going to set that if you're going to call it this, it must be grown within these parameters, and it must be harvested within this window to deliver this consistent experience. And that is one approach to it. The other approach to it is to celebrate the variety of the different experiences that one can derive from a chemovar or I guess a strain within its life cycle. And for me, from a sensory science perspective, I love the opportunity to harvest multiple, or the same plant at multiple times, and then kind of blend to suit what I'm after. And I think that's another art that should be brought into this, is cannabis blending rather than single strain. I think it's a really fun opportunity. And then one last thing, and this goes back to what Colin was saying earlier, is that the varieties will age differently. And this is something that we've seen very much in the hop industry, in that different balances of compounds will oxidize and age and change at different rates. So as a variety goes through storage or curing, which we've seen for many varieties, it's not well understood yet, we'll see that certain varieties will stale very, very quickly, some will actually reach peak aromatic intensity after weeks, and some others will just fade off immediately. And I have seen the same thing with cannabis strains, and it's a challenge. And so I guess to what Colin was saying earlier, working together to have industry best practices for storage, I think is a good idea to prevent staling and to prevent obviously any negative impacts for the consumer, such as mold development or anything like that, but and cannabinoid degradation. But I think that that's a separate conversation from looking at the sort of intrinsic aspects of each individual cross. Does that make sense?
It does. Yeah.
I'd love to.
So those sulfur-containing compounds are called thiols, and sulfides. A sulfide is a thiol.
Sulfonyls, yeah.
Those compounds, while they're not terpenes, because they're mostly like prenolated sulfides, they are derived from isoprene, so they do fall into the bucket of terpenoids. They're terpenoids, they're not terpenes. So those prenolated sulfides that Oswald and others have now identified as sort of the skunky essence of cannabis are indeed similar to those that are naturally found in things like onion and garlic. And what you know, Nick, is that those sulfides, which are at the 2 oxidation state, sulfur can go up in oxidation, and so sulfides tend to oxidize into sulfates and bisulfates and things like that. And so those compounds have much lower volatility than the parent sulfides from which they're derived. So the sulfides themselves are certainly volatile and certainly have that skunky essence. But yes, as you mentioned, on oxidation, on just exposure to air and light and a little bit of moisture and probably a little bit of acid from somewhere, catalyzes basically the oxidation of those volatile sulfides into oxidized forms, which don't have the same nose profile as the parent sulfides. The other thing I wanted to say is that a lot of esters, yes, have certainly like a really, really sweet essence. You can take a putrid smelling acid like butyric acid. I hope that you've never had to smell butyric acid. It literally smells like puke, right? Or decaying flesh, I think, or I don't know, it just got.
And in small amounts, it smells like Parmesan cheese.
Yeah, right. So
In large
exactly,
amounts, it's gnarly.
and so that's again where, and as you know, Nick, that our nose and our olfactory sense has developed this exquisite ability to distinguish between, cheese that doesn't smell good and cheese that does smell good, right? Or just, flowers from, say, a pile of dog shit. But certainly I think where the human sense itself is again part of that, like what we were talking about earlier, the cannabis experience, that if you're just in the dispensary purchase and the mindset of somebody who's in a dispensary, right? Etienne sees this every day, right? Someone's gonna maybe not be able to smell the actual product they walk away with. So what's the other data point they have to look at? Oh, okay, THC content. Again, you're already in that mindset that I'm in a dispensary, I'm paying top dollar, I need to get some kind of measure of value for my purchase, where when you're going to your guy who provides you with legacy stuff, you open up that bag and you can smell it, and there's that interaction that humans have with cannabis, right? Which is that joyful discovery of, oh man, I can't wait to put this in my bowl and smoke it. It smells so good, right? And I think that, again, for the lack of better, people have talked about this whole lab shopping thing where people are trying to find labs that basically inflate their THC results to basically create. This is all an artifact of prohibition. And hopefully, as prohibition ends, as we see this thing unfold, all that kind of shit will go away, because I don't know, the way I look at it again is that, yeah, it's a quality artisan product if that's what you're after. Some people just want Pall Malls from the 7-Eleven. You know, that's not me, and that's probably most of not the people in this panel. And again, that human experience that you miss out when you do just get Pall Malls down at the 7-Eleven is the opening of that bag and the smelling of that. I'm sure Etienne and Etienne's buyers get to experience that, right? It's like, oh, you know, farmer shows up with a bunch of weed or a crop, and it's like, okay, they get to experience, this is what our customers are going to enjoy, because I'm kind of substituting as a bud tender or whatever, a buyer for a dispensary, you know, that quality that we were talking about earlier. You know, quality is a very subjective thing, and I think certainly the terpene profile plays into that. Jar appeal, right, Etienne, is very, very important. It's got to look good in the jar. It's got to be, someone, you know, wants to see frosty trichomes, and, you know, you don't want to see larvae,
No.
you know, sticks and stems. And the last thing I'll just say is this whole thing around, you know, prohibition is, again, because in certain markets, prohibition sort of makes artisan and quality products out of financial reach for, say, common individuals. So they're forced to go buy, you know, products that maybe just aren't as high a quality. And I think that's going to hopefully go away when prohibition goes away, hopefully.
Yeah,
This is
one thing.
why
Sorry,
things
yeah.
like the NO2 cans haven't taken off for people, because they still want to look at their pot. You know, those tuna cans, you can't see inside them, whereas
Yeah.
people still want to look in jars. Even a couple of months ago, I even got a set of jars, and of course, you have to pick them up and you look in the bottom. And as I pick it up and look in the bottom, what do I see? I see hermaphrodites with seeds inside of it. So I can still see what's inside of it, as opposed to if it were in a tin, I can't. And so quality control still rules the roost. And in educated and with more educated consumers, they want to see what they're getting. End of story.
One thing I wanted to bring up, you know, that Nick kind of mentioned was, you know, you touched on was the ideology, you know, of mixed pheno hunts. You know, I think there was a study that I embarked on in a year-long one of popping seeds versus monocropping the single clone of that same varietal. And what I found was a much larger spread of terpenes and cannabinoids from those mixed pheno hunts. And I felt like that, you know, I want to get back to that type of work, because I just saw like CBC upwards to 5%, THCV upwards to 10%, and then running the clone, not even hitting for 1% of any of those compounds. So I think, you know, just in terms of the spirit of ideology and just theory, feel like there's more to learning about, you know, the cannabinoid spread in a population that you might not otherwise see in a single clone that's being passed around to everyone. And that same clone grown in 5 different environments, to like Nick said, it's going to express 5 different traits. So, you know, I just think you have a better shot of a mixed pheno hunt representing a bigger spread of the population. If that's, you know, me throwing out theories here.
Yes.
There's something to it, you know. There's a lot to talk about. It seems, you know, we've gotten so far away from it, that ideology, it seems, in farming. So
Yeah.
One thing
anyone's thoughts on that? Has anyone tried that before?
Well, I was going to mention about, you know, throwing out the idea that a clone or cutting doesn't have all the same anatomy as a seed plant, right? So it can't tap in and capture all that the earth has to offer that a clone would. So you're going to be, you know, stifled right out of the gate. And then the other thing I wanted to mention is, yeah, the consumers right now are shopping from a dashboard, and how challenging that is for them. And you know, they're trying to deliver a poignant or pungent or potent purchase, but we're trying to give them that potent experience more so. And one thing that we have at the retail partner we're working with is smell jars. And this last time I was tabling there, I had our double OG chem that we're growing for Rebel Grown and some Gush Mint, very, very different. I was able to like go back and forth. Like if someone didn't like either one of those, sure, then they could go get our Clementine. But if you were a basic consumer today or a savvy consumer today walking into a shop and you smelled either one of those profiles, you're going to walk out with something. And their mouth waters, their eyebrows pop, right? Like you can't have that, or you don't have that when you are looking into a jar. And I've always liked the idea of the tuna can. Like I'm a sporty guy. I like going to the beach. I like backpacking. I like doing all these things. And like, yeah, that's like my emergency kit. Let's crack that open. But that's because I know what's in it, right? If you don't know, it's very challenging. And I remember there was a company of 3 years ago, they were trying to do like a code that you could scan that had a picture of every single packed container. It was like Cannabis, I think it was called. And that was pretty interesting, but I just couldn't wrap my head around having to scan my herb before I smoked it. Just seemed wrong. Josh, welcome. Good to see you. Josh and Josh.
Hey, what's going on, family? Oh, hey, Josh. Nice to see you too. There you go. Double Joshin'. Everything's going good up here. Snow's coming down the mountains. Got to get the potatoes and cabbages in, last minute ganja, stuff like that.
Welcome to everybody. Good to see everybody this morning.
Good to see everybody this morning.
Thank you. So just to continue this conversation, I'm trying to essentially map out, and I absolutely agree, the concept of you have a certain genetic and it can be expressed in different ways. And all the inputs that go to that in sommelier terms is the terroir, right? And there's so much to it in terms of how it is grown. And obviously a cultivar that is grown indoor versus outdoor, it might not have the ability to adapt to that particular environment, right? It depends on, how, I guess, strong and adaptable that particular plant is. And so when we're leading to helping, at the end of the day, at least my prerogative is to help consumers understand. I train a lot of bud tenders and retailers, and they are selling blind right now. So that's absolutely right. It sucks because the fun of cannabis, in terms of all of the sensory experiences, is being muted, right, and closed off. And whether it is because due to the processing delays in terms of packaging, shipping, distribution, sitting on distribution shelves, going to retail, and then now I'm smoking product that's 6-9 months old. And so that's why I want to talk about, if we could even break it down, if we have breeders in the room, let's talk about how do you get the plant or a particular genetic to express what you want, right? When we're talking about science, in terms of Nick's perspective, there are the quantifiable parameters that we can find correlation to our experience, but our experience is also really biased. When terpenes were really coming out strong, they're like, oh yeah, like when I get something that's rich in terpenoline, like I get this kind of high, and that is an experience. But I would say there's so much more to it, right? Like, what is the impact of esters and thiols? What are the other chemical compounds that affect your high, your experience? And what are we not seeing, right? So many times when I dig deeper into cannabis, THC and CBD sure are displayed because in Canada you're required to do so. But you look at the analysis, and there's actually another 3-5% of other cannabinoids that are not being listed. Well, what's the impact of that? Having a little bit of a different cannabinoid might have a high impact in your overall experience or the overall, exchange of that, in addition to, all the other chemical compounds. We're talking about the entourage effect. And never mind, I also believe that a particular product can lead to experience, but there's different metabolisms and different tolerances and different amounts. You know, at the end of the day, we have to really look at, well, how much are you smoking? How often do you smoke? And look at that. So before we even get to the consumer, you know, guidance component, I wanted to say, how do we empower the bud tenders out there to really describe cannabis in a very confident way, where we can say, hey, you know, let's take a look at the cannabinoid profile. Let's take a look at what the lab analysis can give us. But at the same time, the personal experience is I know why you're here. You're here because, you know, this is a multi-sensory experience when you consume it. When you are looking and smelling at this, we're using all your senses and we're all built differently. So how can I find the power of language to convert all of this science and, you know, hard to pronounce words into something that is, hey, if you really like this, this really minty chocolate flavor profile, you know, I'm going to help you, guide you this way. But at the same time, someone that might not have a higher good tolerance or much experience might need something that is lighter, you see? So I think, you know, and I also want to have an expectation, and that's why I meant the whole GMO, you know, conversation, or something skunk. You know, I never, you know, smoked a skunk #1. I wish I did or could, right? And I want to know, you know, what the best expression of that may be. But if I'm going to smoke a product that has been crossed with skunk, I have an expectation for it to taste and smell like skunk. But when that piece is broken, that's where I lose trust and confidence. And so that's why I say, you know, if we have the perspective starting off with the variety, the breeder's variety, and then how, you know, what should we expect? And then of course the cultivation, right? And the terroir, and then the all the entire environmental inputs that go into it. There's an argument right now, which I absolutely support and believe is, you know, living soil produces amazing cannabis. But you know what's even more amazing is outdoor natural grown cannabis from where cannabis can grow very well in is the best, you know, like just let it be in its place, in its nature where it's supposed to grow, and let it thrive in its own environment there. I've tasted cannabis, which is, you know, bang on, right? Blows my mind. But it might not look nice because it's outdoor, right? So there's a complex thing about bag appeal, right? Sometimes you're going to get that variation. And then of course, harvest and curing. There's a huge argument about that. And that's why this panel is perfect, because we have experts from everybody in different stages of this production that can talk about, hey, what through my experience can lead to particular quality. And then how do we communicate all of these great inputs to the consumer in a way that makes sense to them? Because so many people are still hung up on the indica sativa spectrum, but it's not. You know, it's not about indica sativa. It's more so about the chemotype and the flavor profile and what the cannabis plant, you know, the full expression in terms of its lab analysis and its genetic background, right? So the lab component is a snapshot. It's like a picture of it. But what about all the work and the effort that goes into getting the plant to produce those kind of results? So and of course, if we could, you know, I'm really interested to know if we could just start from the beginning, like seed to sale, because you know, eventually I do want to get to moisture content and packaging and everything, right? And and as a sommelier, you know, we try to convert what these inputs are into descriptors, right? Aromatic descriptors. Your nose knows that so many times you might smell something, you're like, I just like it. It's an emotional reaction, right? It is not a I can determine the aroma, the primary, secondary, and tertiary aromas, right? But eventually, as you train, we will get you there so that you can have the power of language to communicate to the consumer. So the question is, like, for all the experts in here, what are the inputs that you're doing that really have increased quality from your production?
Additionally, onto that, Julie, I want to tag on a quick one, which is that we really need to focus as well on supply chain control. Like in beer, we talk about the cold chain, and we talk about sort of best practices for storage and for packaging, and then shipping and distribution. I think that's a really, really important thing to get at least to have a sort of level playing field on which to judge all these different things. So.
Yeah, absolutely, because it's so unfair. Like I literally, yeah.
I'll just add again, going back to this whole THC potency thing. So when you buy cannabis, or it doesn't matter if you're getting it from a dispensary or you're buying it from your guy, the legacy guy, there's a certain amount of moisture content in that cannabis. And the problem with the THC percentage is that typically in herbs, and this is not anything unique to cannabis, in herbs often oil content, or if they're measuring a particular compound, that content is tied back to something called dry weight. And dried weight means absolutely bone dry, no water in there. And so if you think about it, if a bud which has a certain amount of moisture, and again, the other moisture consideration, just to talk to it for a second, is that above a certain moisture content, it can still support microbial growth. So after harvest, the plant is rendered defenseless. It doesn't have its own plant defenses to fend off microbes. So certainly you can get mold growing if it's not properly dried, and certainly, like, I think in bulk biomass, when you're talking about hemp and you're talking about buying stuff super sacks at a time, understanding moisture content, it's more important to understand something called water activity. Water activity is the measurement that you actually measure in the lab that then you can trace back to determine what the moisture content is there. And typically you want to try to keep moisture content below the threshold at which mold growth would be supported. But that aside, so if you think about it, when you buy a nug, or when you get a nug and there's a certain moisture content, the THC content based on dried weight is sort of irrelevant because you're not smoking. So when you send that sample to the testing lab, the first thing the testing lab has to do is they have to do that water activity measurement. And that water activity measurement tells them what the dried weight of sample is, as opposed to it in its moist state. And the only way they could really do that in a high throughput way, again, just another handicap of prohibition, is the labs are forced to do that in an oven. And when you take that nug, that beautiful nug that you smell, it just has moisture in it, has terpenes, you put it in an oven to dry it out. Well, guess what? Not just the water dries out, right? What else happens? Your terpenes start to evaporate, and you start to decarboxylate your cannabinoids. And there was a really nice presentation given on an online analytical seminar. I'm going to not get the woman's name right, but she really hit this to the T, where that can swing the percentage of measurable cannabinoids, just that effect alone, almost like 10, 15%. So now you have to ask yourself, okay, if you're reporting THC back on a dried weight, what should it be in the actual product that you're actually buying, right? Which is wet, not decarboxylated, and chock full of terpenes, the terpenes that you're attracted to, which is why you bought the thing to begin with, right? So this is again where this whole lab shopping comes up, is that labs cannot, so what labs have to do is they have to measure the moisture content, because whatever is moisture in that flower can't be cannabinoids, right? So if you think about all the weight of a weight percent sample, everything that's in your denominator, there's a whole bunch of water that's in your denominator that you take out of the equation. And you can do something called vacuum desiccation at room temperature, where now you're not losing as much of the terpenes, you're losing some of the water, but guess what? It takes a lot longer to do. And because it takes a lot longer to do, people want their results immediately. They want to submit something and they don't want to wait like multiple weeks. And these labs are backed up. So think about it. They got to do this moisture analysis to basically determine what part of the denominator is the water. Once they could correct for that, now they could measure the sample by HPLC and correct for how much water was in the original sample to get back to the dry weight basis. But
Mark, can you just tell them it's like how the averages work too? Because I think that's important. Is like there's an average they have to look at, because it's not we know there's 11%. We think there's 11%, right? Like, can you elaborate on that?
Well, it's actually it's very complex, because so the plant cells themselves hold on to water. Water activity is a measure of how much freely exchangeable water there is between the biomass and its environment. But the real difficult thing, Colin, is that the plant, like any cellulosic material, is also extremely hygroscopic, meaning that it actually absorbs moisture from air.
Right.
So I actually worked on a project where we were looking at wood treatment chemistry, and we had to really understand the moisture and the relative humidity and how that affect the properties of the wood, because wood itself, here's the real interesting fact: sawdust sinks, wood floats. Isn't that cool? So wood, we all know, floats, right? But sawdust actually sinks. So wood is mostly air, right? It's these cells of air. And like most plant structures, they're not just there for humans to, grow on trees and saw them down and make houses out of them, right? They're there as actually a physical respiration system for the tree to draw moisture and nutrients up from the root zone, and the sugar that comes down from photosynthesis in the leaves. I mean, at the end of the day, there's a whole lot of reasons why wood and natural material is the way it is. But going back to cannabis, it becomes very, very difficult to say get to that bone dry, zero water state. So I think what your question was originally alluding to, Colin, is that when you do the water measurement activity, the company that sells you the water meter also sells you a software package that then extrapolates that water activity measurement up to something called an isotherm. And an isotherm is basically the measurement of water activity per chemically measured water content by something called a Karl Fischer titration, which is how you actually determine how much percent water is in material. But it's very difficult to do a Karl Fischer titration. So if you have the isotherm curve, which is determined by a Karl Fischer titration, you can determine what the water content is. And it used to be, Colin, I remember when that number was 14%, then they moved it down to 11%.
Yeah.
But, I think obviously the lower, when you're buying, say, bulk hemp, and you're buying like 50 super sacks of 450 pounds a piece, you want to know that that stuff is dried and it can sit in your warehouse as you process it, because if it is wet, you could certainly get microbial contamination in those bags as they sit in your warehouse.
100%. Yeah. And then even material that's, sitting, and, a lot of people are bagging to trim, right? So if that stuff's not dried properly, to your point, they could lose that material without them even knowing, until you open the bag and you're like, oh my gosh, like This is
And
all
that was a
gone.
very common problem early on when we were buying kilos and looking through them, is searching for those, because people would spike a bag by throwing in a fresh bud, etc. And so, you know, you had to hunt for that. But going back to Julie's point, familiarity and education are the most important thing for our bud tenders. We train them for a week before they even hit the floor. I own and operate Berkeley Patients Group, which is U.S.'s oldest continuously operating dispensary. We turned 23 years old next month. By the way, I want to say happy birthday to Berkeley Patients Group on 23 years of out there and doing it. But the more that the bud tender is educated and can communicate that with confidence, and that they have that confident education, the better the consumer is to accept, because the consumer is a lot different than they were previous to 2018 when it was strictly medicinal, right? They had specific needs, whereas it's more of a curiosity now with the adult use market. They've now, over the past 4 years, become more accustomed to what those products and product lines out there, but initially they had to all show up to see what they had heard about for the previous 18 years. And to them, it's just like, you know, wow, it was really mind-blowing. So to then communicate that properly and effectively and efficiently was a challenge when we're dealing with groups of 5 to 10 to 15 sometimes, because previously we were dealing with a patient one-on-one. But that communication and that style was just as effective as that one-on-one as it was with those 15, because they were able to communicate that information confidently because they knew it, understood it. We use things like having the Canna Bibles and all the great buds, having them in the break room so that they can flip through them and get a kind of an understanding about all these varietals. But on top of that, by having the dispensary and seeing the amount of people that we are and that we do, we have a good circulation of the genetics that are out there, so their familiarity becomes their confidence to communicate that forward, which is completely one of the most important things that bud tenders have to be, is thoroughly educated to communicate it. Not just communicate it, but communicate it confidently that they understand it, not weak and feeble. And with that, I'm gonna actually step out and say goodbye. I'm gonna go meet Rob and them for breakfast. Much love, everybody. I love you all. Happy birthday.
Yeah, Jen.
Tell Robert said hi.
Great sharing.
Bye, man.
Thanks, Etienne.
See you, Etienne.
Great day, buddy.
Take care, Etienne. Have a great day.
Big love, man.
Happy birthday.
Just so you guys don't know, I do a 4,200 push-ups a month. It's the 42,000 push-up challenge. Put you in peak state. So at 6, 8, 12, 2, and 4, I do 20 push-ups.
Oh, your shoulders holding up, dude.
And this has put me in this peak state, makes me committed to myself, to my growth, to the education, to moving forward. Why am I so happy? Because I put myself in a peak state. That's it.
Nice. You inspire me because honestly, I don't even know if I could do like 5 proper.
I started with 2.
Yeah.
You can start with squats. It's about commitment, guys. Don't tell me you can't. If you say you can't, you're lying to yourself. So I challenge all of you guys in your life. Commit to yourself. Commit to your dreams. This is what we do. We grow. I love listening to you guys. It's awesome. But, you know, you do this for yourself. You do it for your plant. You do it to learn. You do it with that growth. You have to commit to that growth with your plant, right? Understand that commitment gives you that growth, understanding the education. But you do it by committing to yourself too. So once again, every 2 hours, put a timer on your phone. We all got these suckers. Don't give me any excuses. Do 2 push-ups, do 4, do a squat, do a sit-up. Do that for 30 days. I got Mark doing push-ups. I got people around the world doing push-ups. I got a guy in a wheelchair with 1 leg doing push-ups. Mr. Toad, he's awesome. Right, guys? So that's what I do. And that's committing me to my garden. That's committed to learning and educating and understanding water activity, how to grow, long-term cures, all this great stuff. Understanding LEDs, the new growing future, cannabis, cucumbers, peppers, and tomatoes, we're all talking about. really understanding these terpenes, really understanding the growth patterns and how we can actually grow forward. So that was it. That's my kind of morning. Do some push-ups, guys. Thank you.
Yeah, this is
Thanks,
Wade.
Johnny. We'll be doing our push-ups. Go ahead.
Thank you, Marcus. Been a great conversation already this morning. I kind of wanted to go back to the conversation about how a plant can express itself differently in different places, and helping consumers understand that difference that GMO can express in many different ways. I think that's one of the keys to appellations of origin in cannabis, which is a program that the California regulators are trying to roll out. And I'm a big fan of, because I do think that there is a chance for small farmers to succeed in that framework, if you will, to differentiate their product, be it GMO or whatever cultivar you might be having to work with. If you're at, 600 feet in the Central Valley of California, you're going to get a very different expression than you would get at 3,000 feet in British Columbia. Really different versions of exactly the same plants, exactly the same seeds. And I think this is really a key when you start talking. I mean, so far the conversation today has been a lot about how to preserve the beauty of the product created for the consumer. And I think that really one of the keys for cannabis is to do with the specificity of how different practices, different environment, different approach, different intention even can give different expressions to this plant. And I think that's really the key of capturing the interest and imagination of the consumer, is helping them to understand how differently this plant can express itself and how those effects happen in your body. And the other thing I wanted to mention in the conversation about terpenes and terpenoids, one of the things that has always been fascinating to me, I'm a very sensual person. I feel things in my body. And when I smell a flower that's of interest to me, things happen in my body. I just feel it. I don't really know how to explain it more specifically than that. The Ganjier program, I think, is really fascinating because you're trying to give words to those sensory experiences. And it's a really beautiful process. I found when I was working more actively than I am these days with plants, particularly with patient needs, one of the things that was always fascinating to me was when I had an opportunity to take someone into a garden of cannabis plants and ask them which plant was right for them. Especially children were really good at picking out plants that I might have picked without their input. And it turned out that more than once, those plants turned out to be the right one for that person. And I'll leave it at that. Much love, much respect. And I do think a key to the success of the cannabis industry is helping the consumer to understand what's available. Particularly in Hash Church, one of the things I love about this is we are, each of us in our own way, incredible geeks about this plant and about the things that can be made from it. Most people don't have the time or the learning or the desire to really understand all of that. What they want is the information that helps them be consumers that can find the thing they're looking for. And we all know this plant can provide that for those folks if we can help them understand how to find it. Wow, long-winded rant. There's Wade. Oh, by the way, I'm smoking joints today. Just a couple of minutes before I got online, my clumsiness, I knocked my pipe off the table and shattered my glass. And now I'm rolling joints. But much love. Thanks. I figured everybody here could relate.
To Wade's pipe.
Get
Rest in peace to Wade's pipe. I will say you're looking good, Wade, and I'm feeling your energy is high today. And I'm really a couple people have mentioned it in the chat, and we like to see that and to feel that.
I'm feeling like my body is returning to some version of the vitality I used to enjoy. And I will say, I have really come to appreciate the privilege, the form of privilege that good health is. So if you're enjoying good health, celebrate that. Johnny B, that was a great call out on taking responsibility for caring for your body, doing what's needed to make your body as healthy as it can be. And that's part of my fascination with cannabis. But cannabis is not the answer for everything. And really, physical activity is huge, diet is huge, mental attitude, willingness to be at peace with your situation carries a lot of weight in your well-being. And
Wade,
really, quality of life is all it's about. And that's all I got. Thanks.
Love you, Wade.
Wade, I just want to say how much we love and respect you. You have. I was trying to think earlier this morning about your leadership that you bring, and you're such your voice alone is so soothing. It grabs the attention of everyone in the room, and that type of leadership, whether you realize it or not, is unlike none that I've known. It's absolutely incredible, and you're such a champion for the plant and for the people that produce the plant and the place. We sure love and respect you.
Thank you, Craig. It's sometimes hard for me to be comfortable with that because, like in this room, I look around and I feel such respect and awe at the people who are here to talk about their experience in this work. Yeah.
And that's what makes that's what makes you such a respectable elder and mentor for us to look up to and learn from, you know, the humble state that you live in, and that daily gratitude, and just, you know, recognizing the beauty in everyone, and also probably the beauty in all the plants and everything. It's a beautiful teaching for us, especially in this day and age, and even in this industry, you know, when you get a lot of different types of characters and stuff. So thank you, Wade and Monica and the family that supports you at the house there. We do love and appreciate you. Thanks for saying that, Craig.
My chicken was captivated by his voice. My chickens all came in and literally jumped up on the screen when they heard Wade. Like, that was incredible. Like, I couldn't believe it.
He even has power over chickens.
Animals do tend to follow me. Animals do tend to follow me around.
I'll just build on what you said, which I feel is just a part of the movement that, you know, we've all been a part of all these years, which is, it's knowing your farmer, you know, knowing your origins, knowing your food, knowing your medicine. That's why medicinal was powerful in the beginning, because you knew your farmer and maker, and there was a level of trust there, and there was an understanding of what their garden did. So you understood what that GMO was because you knew the farmer. And you can't have appellations of origin and terroir without knowing the farmer. You can play around with regions and say, oh, this region produces something, but honestly, like, a farm's different, you know, down the same valley as another farm based off the practices that you put into it. So, you know, you're going to find different expressions and different soils. So unfortunately, some laws that have been created in recreational have taken away the ability to tout the farmer, to talk about the farmer of origin, you know, especially in Canada, when you're selling 20 kilos to Saskatchewan, you know, you may or may not know your farmer in that case. And if you do, it might be really large, and it may, in that expansion, lose those qualities of terroir and Appalachia because of the environment that it's grown in. So a small batch, knowing your farmer, showing up to the dispensary, getting to know people, and human interaction along with plant interaction probably is our best path towards health. We can use bulk medicine and oils here and there. We can eat bulk foods and do all those things, but it's not going to give us the same transformative health that we may need in times of sickness or in times of health. We should be continuing our health path, even in our health. So, you know, you don't have to be sick to want to get better. You should just be better while being better. And, you know, if you're a really humble regenerative farmer, you're able to get exercise, like Johnny B says. You're able to interact with labs and understand microbes, microbiology, microscope work with teas and soils, and you get to know the science side of things, but you also get the spiritual touch where you get to actually live with the crystals that surround you. And when, you know, you're providing that medicine to people, how are we going to make that an SOP? I know Kelly has sat with thousands of women at birth, but she doesn't have a birth manual that says, you know, this is exactly what makes this happen and another thing happens. You know, she's using intuition and knowledge and, you know, interaction and experience to learn that. So, you know, knowing your farmer and knowing your medicine maker, that's our best path towards health. And so when we can go down to the dispensary or to a medical dinner, or we have some special high-end ways of meeting up with people, I think that's a really good way to really learn, for bud tenders to learn from people and from farmers to connect with consumers, for consumers to understand farms better. And yeah, that's one thing to think about when medicine's going out to the market.
I couldn't agree more. I just wanted to share like my experience. There was a time when I was growing a lot of vegetables for market. I would take to farmers market and to chefs and to the co-ops. And when my experience working with the co-ops, you know, not to knock a co-op, like we shop at co-ops and they can be a really good option, but often they're doing things to make money and they have to buy low, you know, things at good deals. And just like more often than not, I feel that I get disappointed with what I see actually coming through the co-ops. You know, I see that they try to support a lot of local farmers and they often have their pictures on the wall. But when I look at the tags, like, you know, I live in Washington, it'll say California. I'm like that, you know, especially the lettuce, like where I live, you can grow lettuce year round, you know, with a little bit of effort. And it's just like, it disappoints me. And so I just like couldn't agree more with what Josh is saying, you know, and I really think that's what, you know, has made Western culture, it made most cultures, let me retract that, most cultures thrive is small farms and being connected to the food source and to who is producing products. And anyways, just wanted to like agree on that.
I feel like, thank you, Josh. I think, you know, that opens up a huge can of worms, because watching the industry in terms of how business is run these days, it's very much about big companies with financial backing and price skimming the market to undercut everybody else that's really having the right intention in producing good quality small batch products, right? And so that's why the mass market right now, the majority of cannabis sales is not this small batch single source farmer, like like a farm to table kind of approach. It's more so about like, hey, let's hit the mass market. But I don't want to go there. I wanted to actually bring this conversation back to all the inputs for quality, and then looking at the picture of at least the quantitative, right, analysis of quality. So a question, maybe Mark, you can answer me, because this conversation about esters and thiols and sulfites, I wonder, where are they produced in the cannabis plant, and what does that type of volatility look like compared to terpenes? Because I know that there is a huge following of cannabis consumers that love that gas, that funk, that skunk. And so and how this all relates to storage, because when someone, a let's say a purchaser at a cannabis dispensary is curating a menu and they're trying to get a product and showcase a product that has that gas, funk, skunk. Well, yeah, I also find that it does, when you store it for a long time, the funkier it gets and it's really pleasing. Whereas products that are like bright and sweet and citrus and sugary, right? It's this, I want, whether it's the storage or something that it doesn't last as long, right? It doesn't cure as beautifully as compared to like the skunky, gassy aromas. And so that's my perspective. But Mark, I want to know more from you.
Yeah, I mean, there could really be some basis in like terpene preservation in certain varieties that just, again, are kind of like fleeting. The analogy we've talked about here on Hash Church before is that Glade air freshener product, that you plug into the wall. It's just some heating element that basically heats up a thin film that releases these floral scents. Yeah, when you first plug it in, it smells wonderful. It smells just like the flowers on the package. But about a day or so later, it's got like kind of like a more of an antiseptic kind of clean hospital kind of general smell. There's still a floral essence there, but you've basically done fractionation. And Nick, you know this from the hop industry, is that the most volatile terpenes, the way that fragrances are looked at is in notes, right? And so the way almost it's kind of analogous to music, which is kind of cool. I think about it all the time. Like certain notes are really loud, and people actually use loud to describe cannabis. And I remember when it was first, when I first heard that, I'm like, yeah, right, loud. It's that punch that you get, that terpene punch. And yes, certainly, like you say, Julie, these compounds are fleeting. Nick could tell you this, that it's a real challenge to basically capture the essence of the plant as in cultivation into a product, into the jar. And if you could do that, that means you have a successful extraction method if you're going after concentrates. Because to me, it's like, we know these things are cannabinoid producing machines. There's no question that we could extract the cannabinoids. The real question, and what differentiates the different varieties, and what a lot of growers put a lot of investment into, right, is the different varieties and the different flavors, and maintaining those flavors through a processed product is really quite a challenge, because you have to treat these compounds with kid gloves, right, Nick? I mean, a little bit of oxidation goes a long way. And the last thing I'll remind myself is that when they package potato chips, they inflate those bags with nitrogen to make sure there's a pillow of nitrogen over the top of those plant oils, which if it sits on the shelf for too long will start to go rancid if there's air in there, right? But if there's nitrogen in there, nitrogen kind of keeps in the inert atmosphere, which also, I think, Nick, just the idea of like pushing by like people have always talked about like vacuum sealing the herb, and certainly for certain applications, that's a great thing to do. Vacuum sealing, you pull all the air out, but there's certain machines that actually pull the air out, but then reintroduce nitrogen to give you almost like a pillow of weed, as opposed to this shrink wrapped, quarter pound that used to be this big is now this small. But like, again, the chemistry that goes on to preserve those flavors is just part of like the natural curing process that happens in cheese and pickles and yogurt. I mean, really, this is like food gone bad, but food gone bad in a good way because of the way that the microbes are transforming that yogurt, or the way that, again, like when you put pickling spice and you have a certain kind of chemistry that's going on in the curing of those pickles, there's things that are happening there that, again, is uniquely human, right? Pickles are a uniquely human thing, right? It's kind of like ayahuasca, right? We were there to basically put together these different components in a way that humans had to be here to do that, right? Wise humans from the jungle.
Yeah, and
So
yeah, go ahead, Nick. I
Oh.
think you're gonna say similar things. So
yeah, I wanted to dip into this. So there's a couple of things that Mark brought up that I think are in response to what Julie was asking that I think are really, really important. So your Glade analogy is a great one. But to make it more perhaps to cannabis, I won't buy anything larger than a half-gram vape anymore, because as you're heating it up and as you're consuming it, you're driving off those top notes, and it changes, and you'll see the darkening, and that's from the heat reactions. But you'll drive off the lighter notes first, and your first rip is going to be very, very different from one that's halfway down the cartridge. So larger volumes is not actually the better way to store things, especially for consumers. And to what Mark was saying, there's a couple of different things going on. There's a lot of things going on. So I'm just going to kind of try to riff on them as I remember. Obviously, light, heat, and oxygen are the enemies, to a point. If you want to preserve it from the very, very first experience, you want to preserve all those notes. I think what Marcus has done with bubble hash and full melt and all that stuff, and that separation, that concentration under low oxygen environment and under inert gas or something like that is the best way to preserve it, because the vast majority of the compounds that we're interested in are in the trichomes. So being able to preserve those and concentrate those is really the way to preserve those aromatics. That's why I typically move to concentrates for myself now, just because I enjoy it more, and it's also easier in the lungs. That said, there is a role for oxidation and that's that you see that in the curing process, that some of those compounds you actually want to oxidize to get those higher notes, or those heavier notes that you're after, like some of the onion and garlic. Those are predominantly oxidized thiols and stuff that have become these very, very chunky aromas. That said, as you are smelling things, and as the plant matures, and as you go through your consumption, you will be selectively experiencing different compounds at different levels. So as an example, if you leave a variety past its prime, all the varieties will eventually tend towards heavier, skunky, garlicky, oniony aromas because of that degradation. They cease producing a lot of the fresher compounds, and a lot of those compounds are much more aromatically powerful than the lighter top notes. The top notes are still there, but you just can't differentiate them unless you fractionate them apart. And that's a fun project I'm working on as well, is trying to really see how we can sort of blend to create these experiences using multiple feedstocks and stuff, and then also fractionating those feedstocks apart and create entirely novel experiences from different plants that you would never get that in one variety. And so I think there's a lot of fun there.
Nick, I just wanted to say, you just reminded me of something that I wanted to mention that I forgot, which is that dimethyl sulfide is kind of like the essence of broccoli. I mean, it's got that kind of like almost rotten egg smell, but more organic, and it's kind of like
canned corn, sulfide. Tomatoes,
yeah. But if you take that up one oxidation state to dimethyl sulfoxide, now you got something that's got a real kind of like garlic, almost overpowering, kind of like the smell of DMSO. It's very, very different than DMS, but that tells you that, again, there could be like trace amounts of oxidation that happens to those thiols that takes them up to the sulfoxides or higher oxidation. It's on its way up to being a sulfate, which is a fully oxidized, and that's again, I'm just throwing it out there. Maybe again, in the curing of those skunky varieties, to get the maybe less harsh skunk, but more of like a nutty kind of garlicky thing, it kind of goes through somewhat of an oxidation, but it's all speculation.
Well, I think actually that's that is one of the key drivers during the quote unquote cure process, because there's so many different mechanisms than proposed. But if you see people doing a hot cure or a cold cure of their resins, their live resins or their concentrates, you're not going to be having a lot of that microbial activity in there. You're not going to be having a lot of sort of plant sort of metabolite or metabolism in there. So I think it is just basically chemical. And when you and the primary mechanism I'm suspecting is oxidation.
A sulfide, if we just have a beaker of sulfide sitting here as we speak, it'll start turning into it'll just air oxidize. It's an autocatalytic. Yeah, like you said, that's light and air. There's enough oxygen in air to basically promote that reaction. And
even under inert gas, you're never going to get all the oxygen out. There's going to be some remaining in between the compound, or in between the heads, or in the plant matter, and even you also get cascade reactions where oxygen and hydrogen and water are going to be liberated throughout the process. So those reactions can also provide more of sort of the base, some might say staling, or at least or elements that can convert compounds into other forms and oxidize them, or have them go up and down states. So it's really interesting.
Am I correct? Like in the skunky thing that happens with beer, it's a completely different set of chemistry, but still oxygen and oxidation is sort of rearing its ugly head there.
It's there's a couple different processes there, but in beer it's typically actually it's called light struck. It's a light reaction. It's a photon that knocks off I forget exactly what it is. It's quite a complicated reaction, but it's a fun one. And you end up with I think it's 3-methyl-2-butanediol, which is that very skunky character. Cannabis is also, because of those aromatics, some of the shared aromatics is also very sensitive to light. And again, so light and heat are the two main drivers, but light and heat in the presence of oxygen, it's going to go fast, like seconds. If you ever want to try it, get an IPA or beer if you consume, take it out into the sunlight, and then literally a second. I mean, the reaction happens almost at the speed of light. And you can just put it out in the sun and pull it back, and it will change completely. It'll skunk real fast.
Right. So Nick, isn't it safe to say, I mean, to sort of address Julie's issue around quality and freshness, is that it's kind of like, again, I don't know if you could have kind of like an expiration date that makes sense, because in most cases, most expiration dates on products that are in dispensaries, they just 6 months, that's it expires right at that day, right? So there's a magic that happens that particular day that makes it now expired, right? But to put some type of I don't know if you know these little Bovida packs that basically act as kind of like the way a humidor would act in analogous way to tobacco. And do you think that there's some? So I actually forget where I talked to those guys. I think it was on Future Cannabis Project, and they want to set up a call with me, because I think there's an interesting aspect again around conditioning the environment in which the cannabis is packaged. And it's really important, because I think, again, like if you're going to mass produce and you're just going to put a bunch of stuff in a warehouse and it's just going to inventory many weeks before it gets, I mean, that's not the way cheese works, right? And certainly, I mean, again, I don't see where things always come unraveled, is that states have different rules around compliancy and packaging. And cannabis companies are trying to make efforts to reduce packaging footprint, and less plastics, and trying to go to more natural packaging. But ultimately there is no thing, because it's a fresh product. It needs to be grown fresh. It needs to be taken to the place of commerce and bought and consumed while it's still fresh, just like the produce that we buy. And it's not something that you could just put in a warehouse for several months and just pull down whenever it's convenient.
One thing I think that struggle I've been through is the thing you're kind of striking a chord with me is like, we didn't really talk about headroom and how much
Headspace
air
is a
gets
huge
locked
thing.
in. Yeah, like these are all things we learned that we're like, oh my God, over time, my cannabis in a jar with lots of headroom goes bad faster. And, this is all, no one was there to tell us that this is happening. Right. So, I'm still learning and going in the
Well,
shop.
wait a second. Sam was, right, Marcus?
Yeah,
Sam was there, and Sam was there to tell us all about it, but none of us were listening.
Yeah, totally.
There were a whole bunch of people
right?
listening, but yeah.
I guess what I'm trying to get across is like, I had to learn through trial and error all this stuff. And I think you're highlighting is still things that today predominantly producers are not thinking about, but the packaging companies are, and they're trying to sell it on producers. And I think that ideology is a little backwards, where we're really the ones that are supposed to be saying to these people that are providing these solutions to us that, hey, we need less headroom, we need better seals, we need better shelf life, and to start that narrative and that conversation with them so they can provide the solutions for us. Because I think that's the biggest hurdle today that I find is jars are great, but this has too much headroom too.
Colin,
and
exactly.
Doesn't really make sense.
One of the things. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Go ahead, man. Addison, I want to hear it. Go for it, buddy.
I mean, the issue with cannabis storage is even at Steeple, when we started doing the nitrogen infusion packaging for farmers to save their cannabis. The problem with that is as soon as you take the cannabis out of nitrogen, it degrades twice as fast. Starts to break down immediately quick. So what we need to look at is that and understand is that cannabis is a perishable product, no matter how you cut it. The only way to slow that process is to turn it into water hash. And then take that water hash and store it for a longer period of time, convert that back in and bring it in different ways, bring those compounds in different ways back into the subject of matter, what you're trying to do, whether it's an edible or anything else. And it's just I hear everyone talking about like, mass production or our industry and what's happening. Name another industry where this doesn't apply. It applies in every single industry. So you can learn from those industries. Like the issue is that we don't have interstate commerce. That's the biggest issue. So no big massive player can run the whole fucking game yet. So when everyone gets worried about some big massive player, it's not going to happen yet. You don't have interstate commerce. It has to be split up. We all know to run a company in multiple states is a motherfucker. There's no question about it. On the body, on the mind, on the soul, it's tough work. So you have to decentralize yourself in order to do that. Some guys are doing a great job of it right now. They're able to present a product in different areas that are standardized as much as possible. But packaging is a huge issue. And I think that what you're talking about, Colin, I'm so stoked. I just saw the other day these new pop top caps that go on the concentrate and they snap the top and it sucks all the air out of it and it seals it. So then when you open it, the answer is no air. The answer is to remove oxygen and not to add nitrogen. It's a perishable product. So I think the other thing too is
I agree with that. The
small farmer and the fact that the small farmer's product, if a small farmer's product is being pushed out, in my opinion, typically it doesn't have the correct marketing and it doesn't have the correct push behind it, because we all know that's typically a better product. But if it's not marketed correctly and it's not produced, a big company reached out to me. They're doing a big panel on this new hash thing they're doing. And they had all these different panels about all this stuff and nothing about branding and marketing. And I was like, what a mistake. Like we brand and market in this industry by looking over at the other guy and going, oh, Myron jars, got that. Okay, big label. Okay, I'm gonna put a big label on. Oh, and fucking fruit colors and sticker. Okay, like, that's not marketing. Like the guy that comes outside of the box and does something that catches everyone's attention, that also has an amazing product inside of it, that may have a nod towards, nature and the environment, and that's who's gonna pull ahead and push ahead. And and it's like, but it's really I think, to answer the question, when it comes down to cannabis itself, it all needs to be turned into hash. It could be enjoyed as flower for a short period of time. That's awesome. That's for for the right now. You can't store cannabis for a long period of time. I've never seen anybody successfully pull it off. I've never seen it be like me not have to be honest to them to be like, this sucks. No, it's not as fresh as it was. It's not as good as it was. That we all know that everything has a point of perfection in the curing process. When you're like, oh fuck, oh man, yep, we're here. but that's a period in time. It's a moment in time. And you got to keep doing what you do, and you got to keep networking and build a great community to have that feeling all the time. So the community part's a huge part. You know, when it comes to packaging, we're here. Like I'm starting to see new packaging stuff, you know, alchemy jars, different shit that just gets an understanding of what's there. Like my alchemy jars, I've tested them. I've done I put like 4 grams in an alchemy jar. I'll put 12 grams in an alchemy jar. Or I'll put 22 grams in an alchemy jar. And I let those sit, and I hit out of them, and I open and close them. There's no difference in the space, how it preserves that product is incredible. It just does such a great job.
This thing was full. When I saw you last, dude, this thing was full, and you could see it's still beautiful in the very bottom.
Yeah.
Of it. I've smoked the whole jar myself, you know?
Yep.
Yeah.
I couldn't agree more. I wanted to bring this up in the conversation. I think it's a good time, but like the last few weeks, my head was kind of going back in time to when we first started making rosin, and I was selling full melt hash in the medical market up here. And it was also the time when we were transitioning to fresh frozen. And so there was a period where I would have a lot of dried material, and we would wash it with water, and we'd sell part of it as hash, as full melt hash. And then we'd squish it, the other stuff that wouldn't melt, and put it out as rosin. And so the rosin was a byproduct there for a while. And I was just kind of thinking back through the cultivars I was using, and remembering that the ATF in particular was a good, and the cherry pie was a good thing that stuck out of my mind. When we dried the flower, and even almost over dried it, did a long dry on it, and then washed it, we were able to pull out better yields and a better quality product with certain cultivars. For the last however many years, everyone's been really focused on fresh frozen, and it's done an amazing thing in it. But we've kind of gone to this categorization. We've said certain things wash or don't wash, and that's not really where we should be. Like in Kaya is kind of hitting this. I think it's starting to come up, and I actually went back. I think it was like episode 65 or something in Hash Church. I had to go back quite a ways and listen to a number of Hash Churches, old ones, about around that time, because I remembered what I was doing and what I was putting out, and I could look back at my Instagram and get a timestamp. And Sam and fucking Cuban talking about dry sift, about taking it for a full 90-day dry. And all this just clicked into my head, and I was like, dude, we need to start fucking around with like dialing in which variety we fresh freeze, which variety we dry, then wash or dry sift, you know. And so kind of part of the answer to your question, Julie, is we're still fucking riding trends a bit ourselves. We're still a little bit confused ourselves. We're getting so much better. And the more online and the more community and the more events, it's like we're learning rapidly, but there's still a lot to, you know, we could go back, like, you know, Sam knew it all along. Could be really, you know, that should be the t-shirt. Sam always set told
Sam
us.
knew all along.
Yeah. Like
hash makers are the archaeologists of the cannabis industry. They are the guys who... They are,
dude. I'm watching. So the one more thing I was going to say, I was watching these guys in Balochistan in Afghanistan cut the whole plant, hanging up just inside a clay building, let the whole thing dry through the winter, similar to tobacco, where it has a bit of fluctuation, but it's staying within a bandwidth. And then they shake off the dry heads, and they're you know, the pictures I see, their hash game is better than ours especially when it comes to doing dry resin, you know. Anyways, I'll shut up and let you go, Addison. But
well, they're all different flavors. Like I think what people should do, if I owned a Type 6 here in California, I already thought of it. I would take a strain in, I would run it every fucking way you could. I'd run it BHO, I'd run it solventless, I'd run it, or a Type 7, I'd run it every single way. I'd dry it, I'd run it into, you know, use the Spanish methods of like drying and pressing and the old techniques, and do all that stuff, and then have it all out in front. And then you go, okay, well, this one's going to be great in a proxy without water as a dry press. This one's going to be great. Oh, you know what? This strain expresses itself most, you know, the best as a dried finished product, it seems. And it'd be great to have all of those different things out there, and then have a cup where people get to come and try those things and give their opinion. I mean, I pat Dougie on the back for constantly being active in our community and doing all this stuff as a marketer, you know, Dougie from Hitman. But him to come out and be like, oh, a blind test You know, have an event that's a blind test where people come to it, and you the consumer sits down with a blindfold on, and you're then being challenged to tell whether it was organic, indoor, outdoor, BHO, solventless. It's like, what the fuck are you talking? That who gives a fuck? You just took all the fun out of what we do. For what reason? For ego? So that you can go, ha ha, you don't know what you're talking about. Like, no, that's not what this community is about. That's not what fucking all these things are about. It's definitely not what the fucking plant's about. I mean, it should be like, did you get high? Did you like it? High five. What's next? Like, that's what it should be, because that leads to hugs and happiness and loving kindness and community. It's not this division of like, oh, he's got pie on his face because there's Marcus, the king of fucking solventless hash, and he thought a BHO was an indoor solventless. It's like, get the fuck out of here, dude. Like, oh, what do you win? Humiliation is your prize? Like, what the fuck is this? Like, you know, that's division. I think it, you know, our entire industry and community, I love the hash component of it. I've kind of been pulled towards this, I think, like a massive planet, because it is, I feel like, the best heads and the people that are really like, and not to say that the other people aren't great. It's just, we're not about marketing anything but the product and letting the product speak for itself. And if the product's in a Mylar fucking bag, would the hash industry continue to allow it to happen? Fuck no. We'd say that's trash. We don't want that as part of what we're going to support. The flower industry can, because it's real estate to be marketed. It's that Mylar bag that can be marketed. But like you say, Colin, it fucks up the product. It's too much headspace. There's too much stuff in there. You know, there needs to, go ahead.
Oh, so like to that headspace aspect, and to purging, and to the pillow packs like they do for chips and stuff. Interesting side note, my uncle actually is the patent holder for that process. He actually invented that way back in the day, for veg and stuff like that. But what's interesting to consider this is that you can actually store flower products for very long times in the appropriate environment. And so one of the ways you would do that is, like you mentioned, Mylar bags with inert gas packaging, and then at close to freezing or sub-freezing temperatures, and that will dramatically extend your shelf life to the point where you could probably pick it up in 5 years and not have a precipitous loss of character. It will change a bit, but it won't be terrible. I mean, that's one of the ways that you.
How quickly will it degrade afterward?
The degradation is it's about the same. You don't see a lot of acceleration. It's really just that the perception of degradation is much higher, because you've opened it, it smells fresh, and then you've introduced oxygen, and poop, it starts to go, because the oxidation reactions are very, very quick.
That shelf, it kind of falls off that shelf.
Yeah, exactly. So what in an ideal world, consumers would have the ability to open, select. Ideally, it would be a single serving thing, but that's going to be incredibly wasteful. So that wouldn't work. But one of the things you can do is you can take your serving size or whatever you're going to consume out of the package, and then vacuum it out, and then reflush it, and then put it back in the freezer, and that'll work. That'll help it stay fresh for quite a long time. To the headspace discussion, though, even in an inert environment, you have the ideal gas law being in effect, which is that basically once you have the capacity for volatilization, you will get volatilization into the headspace to where it is equal between the source material and the volume in the headspace. So assuming you have X grams or X micrograms of your volatiles, if you have 50% headspace, you're going to have 50% of those volatiles end up in the headspace, and 50% still stay in the plant material. That's really unavoidable. So I think headspace reduction is a huge thing that you need to think about. That said, vacuum packing isn't always the best way to do it either, because you're crushing the material, and you're also you lose some of that character. So again, I hate to always bring up the hop industry, but we've got a lot of experience in this. we found that actually pillow packs were more effective at preserving the material for a longer time. One of the reasons was also that in vacuum packing, you create fragility in the package because the plant material is sticking against the sides and it creates little hard nuggets. And if those, they're moving around a box, you'll shear off some of that mylar, some of the metal foil that's in between the mylar layers, which then allows oxygen to permeate into the product. And so you crack the foil liner in between those layers and it starts to go off. Glass jars don't have that problem. Metal jars don't have that problem. So that's certainly an option to do that. You can vac pack in those. But again, in the process of vacuuming, you're going to be sucking all those volatiles out as well. So you kind of, there's always trade-offs, and it's trying to figure out, as you said, what works best for the form factor of that material that you have. And it just requires testing because every strain is going to be different. One of the things that you run into is also that you have sort of, I'm going to use hops again, you have what's called a storage index. And that is primarily determined by the degradation of alpha acids, so it'd be equivalent like to cannabinoids that we're talking about. And depending on the volatile mix and other compounds that are present, that storage index will go up or down. So if you have a lot of compounds that are have the potential to have highly reactive degradation products, that is going to lead to a reduced storage index, because those are providing the building blocks for the reactions that will degrade or at the very least change the material that's in there. And so I think there's a lot to be learned from the other industries. Like you said earlier, this is the same for cheese, same for salad, it's the same for hops, it's the same for any agricultural product. You have to try to preserve it as long as possible, and you're trying to preserve that character. If it goes in, back to the sort of the rant I had earlier about quality versus character, if you have all the quality metrics in place where it's not going to have any aflatoxins, there's no microbial contamination, and it's in as secure an environment as possible, then it's still going to change. And so it's still safe to consume. It's just not going to be as, it's not going to be the same level that it went into the package as. But it's, this is something we need to.
It's all a matter of rate, right, Nick?
It's all a matter of rate. And
if you want great products like cannabis, grow them yourself. Well, it comes down to, like, if you want the best of the best, then grow it yourself. If you want a consistent product, you need a mass producer to consistently produce it so that you can enjoy it. And then the other thing is we don't live in a world anymore where you can't go out and get it. You can continuously get the same thing over and over again now because the dispensary is there or the black market's there in a stronger way. So it's not like back in the day when you'd find something, you had to buy as much of it as you could, and then you had to figure out how to fucking store it, and then you break it out on Marcus's birthday, and then, you don't have to do that anymore because we do have large mass producers that can produce it. And then my brain started wandering back. Remember we were talking about large producer to small producer and kind of pushing out the small producer, and it's just going to be big producers. That happens in every industry. And then how do they even out? Well, the small producer, like the artist, will go with a larger distributor and get that product out on a mass scale. And that's kind of how that works. And it's in every industry, and everyone's still protected. I think if everybody just lived a healthier life, they wouldn't worry so much in their head about all these other things that could be more easily solved through a healthier lifestyle.
So thank you for that. There were so many points I wanted to chime in here because I have so many questions for you, and really valuable insights. Thank you. But I wanted to kind of flip it. Have you come across cultivars that bag appeal looks great, loud, smells amazing, lab test shows, high terpene, it's a 3%er with, high cannabinoid content, and then you smoke it and the flavor is definitely not in conjunction of what you expect compared to the aroma. And the flavor is like rather sometimes, like the worst for me is when it's bitter, right? When it gets bitter, I'm like, I put it out. So does anyone have anything to say about that? Like when there is a
Yes.
difference in the
Trash genetics.
I think a lot of that has to do with cure. Because if cannabis is not properly cured, you're still going to have sugars in the cellular material. And curing is about converting the sugars into starches, which burn clean. Sugars don't burn clean. And I think that is one of the big problems for the consumer. Cannabis that smells a certain way, but when you burn it, it tastes and smells completely different. They're burning sugar.
I agree.
That's all I have. And it takes time to do a proper cure. And it needs moisture in the cells of the plant material for that chemical reaction to happen.
But then
It's a whole
also-
art in and of itself. And that's all I'll go back to listening. Thank you.
In a pheno hunt, if you're looking at 20 seeds of the same strain, what can happen also is they're doing selection, and the right one makes it, or the wrong one makes it through. And it'll be like what you're saying. It could be perfectly cured. It could be perfectly done. It's just that inhale, exhale flavor or that taste isn't there on that pheno. It just didn't come through on that one. Where another one may not look as great, but that's really coming through on it. And it could be selection too. I mean, I see, because look at the rainbow belts right now. It's, and the 3.0 and the 2.0, and it's coming in different ways, and you're seeing it. There'll be some versions of it, just like a yield. There'll be some versions of it that have all the same characteristics, and then it won't yield in solventless hash. Or it has all the same characteristics and it does yield in solventless hash. That's the most valuable cut. That's the one that's coveted, that Archive owns themselves and they hold on to, and only Chris gets to run, and all those different things, and it makes it viable. But he's right. It's, if it's not cured correctly, then you're not going to get that final taste and flavor, and you'll see the ash too might be dark. It might not look correct. So it's all part.
Even through population, each pheno is going to require different things, and cure is absolutely one of them, and might require it being a little colder, or a little warmer, or more humidity or less humidity. I mean, all these things are all attributes to what makes it, viable. And we try to do this one size fits all, especially at scale, and we don't, we're just not there in terms of genetics to be able to do those things.
No.
How lucky are we, though, that this is such a complex plant with complex volatile organic compounds, and then we've got our own olfactories involved and our own systems that, our perceptions and our sensitivities and our blind spots and all of these things that just create.
On the cutout.
Mark,
Free.
Tesla.
Come back.
I don't know. It is that weird. Someone's muting you. That's for sure. I don't know what powers that is, but definitely always want to hear you out. However, I'm just gonna fill the gap here when you can get better reception or something like that. I wanted to talk about that in terms of how the product is grown. Has anyone, especially the growers here, tried different growing mediums, but with the same cultivar or the same product, so that you see, okay, what yields a different hash or flavor or burn quality experience?
I'd love to chime in on that one, because I've been growing the same strain for the last 18 years of everything, and I've grown basically with different nutrients and done a lot of testing, and I've had my own HPLC sitting in the garage, and I've done all the testing and everything you guys talk about. So I have, I've been kind of writing about it at the same time. And I've really been thinking, okay, where do you start with this, to be honest? Recently when Mark, we did a cleaning of some hash, and we did a video there. And I remember during that video, Mark, we were doing that cleaning of the heads with the glove tech, and you're like, look how fresh this weed is. It was hung dry for 4 months. Okay, so knowing people don't do this. So 4-month hang dry, and he thought it was still fresh. So understanding and how that cure comes into process and how the grower comes into play, because everybody can grow cannabis. I've seen everybody grow some fantastic weed there. Half the people, 90% of people don't know how to cure their weed, and they destroy it in the process. That's what it comes down to. It's that art is learning how to cure cannabis and how to actually hang dry. We're all going to confirm that hang dry is the way. It's not like you're cutting the shit down, trimming it up, let it dry on screens or in machines or anything like that. I've hung dry for 3 weeks, 3 months, 6 months because of injury, stuff like that. I had no choice. And then with those, it gave me this great way of an education to see how we control the relative humidity in the room and temperature are the key. Right, this is the 100% the key, guys. This is how you grow, and this is everybody. This is how you cure your cannabis. In my opinion, this is my hallucination. What I've been understanding through the stickiness comes down to the water activity and that cure. So this has been great for me to understand and see through time. And I start my cures around 88% humidity in the room. People will think that's crazy. Hang dry, sealed room, no fans. They're pretty big rooms, so I got to look at the amount of air that's in that room to the amount of cannabis that's in that room. I haven't really gone into those scientific details, and I'd love to work with some people and look at some of those numbers, because I think this is going to be a really key thing of understanding really good cannabis for the patients and people getting those standardized terpenes and that same consistency of water activity in cannabis. And this comes down to that relative humidity to the grower and the guy curing it, plain and simple. We got to cure it properly, we got to grow it properly, but that cure, and then once it passes on to that next level, we got to hold that water activity in the jar, and whatever means you're going to use that with. There's a few products on the market, but you can also keep it at a relative humidity level and keep that in a jar. I've had jars for 8-10 years, and they popped in here from 2012 that were 10 years old. And they popped and smelled just fucking amazing. And I knew it was in that jar at that point. So when I look at the relative humidity in the room around 67%, that gives me my AW and my cannabis, and I keep it there 65 sometimes, at 60 degrees, a little bit lower, sometimes 55. And that holds my AW between 58 to 59, which is perfect for smoking. Now, percentages of moisture levels, I'm always kind of bad on this, and maybe a few people might be able to help me with those moisture levels when we look at the water activity, Nick, and that moisture levels, because for some reason I know it's around what's the moisture level at like the 58% in cannabis if it's an AW. I had it, but I'm just kind of blank on it right now.
That's going to be between. Hang on a second, I got an image here to see. I think I tried to post it earlier.
Let's talk about this, right? Like
it is. Let me see. Based on some of the isotherms that are out there, you said between what you said 0.55 or 58%.
Yeah,
you're going to be looking at about 10.2, 10.3% moisture.
Right, and then
thereabouts.
62. So 62 is at what?
62 is going to be closer to 11.
So we got 10.8, and then we got 11. 10.8 close to
10.2 to 58 is going to be about 10.2, and then 63 is about 11 and a bit.
11 and a bit. So that's something that I've been kind of being, and I think a lot of people concur that so there's no mold levels at that. No, then we're not going to get any contaminants. We're not going to go moldy. We're not going to get any microbes, anything going there. Like that's over the 65%, if I'm correct. That's what I've been.
Johnny, do the stalk snap?
Yes, please, Mark. Thank you.
Do the stalk will snap?
The stock will snap after 3 weeks.
That's a good shade tree way of doing it. That's how I select.
That was the old
things that
school
are
way,
dried in.
right?
Well,
Not Frank.
I don't have a moisture meter, but
And
yeah,
I've cured
if
it-
the stems
cured it-
snap, they're ready to come off the sticks.
I've cured
if
in
you-
so many
if you're
different
able.
ways, guys. I've cured in paper bags. I've cured in jars. I've put them in closets, and we've wrapped them and we've cured them. There's so many different ways of curing, of course, growing for the last 30 years. So I've looked at different ways, but we now control our moisture level, relative humidity in the room with that temperature, and I can hold it in that room for 6 months, 8 months. And I can cure that just perfectly. And those terps are fine. Once they go into the jar and I seal that jar, if I'm opening and closing a jar all the time, I put a humidity pack in there, so I have that relative humidity stay at that level. If I'm putting stuff in a jar that's going at 67%, I seal and I'm good to go. So depending on how, and that's a jar, that's an airtight, not a plastic bag, right? It's going to dry out in a Ziploc bag. When we really refrain, I'll put it in a Ziploc bag, well, then throw a humidity pack in there or something like that. So that's where you got to kind of look at how I've been able to see how, and I've been doing this now for 7 years, really understanding humidity levels with Bovita. They've been kind of working with them. And over the last 6 years and me doing it beforehand in jars that I've had curing for, I had my first Medikush when I won in a jar downstairs, right? So that's 2012. So I've got all of these things that I've kind of looked at, because I'm looking at a standardization for myself so I can consume cannabis for the terpenes that give me that joy, that give me that pain relief. That's what I need. I need the consistency. So
Johnny,
I've been able to look at
testing the terpenes and what's the highest percent at what RH and temperature? What's that like triangle.
Yeah, I can go grab all those testings and I can share with you guys about that. All of what I did it with. I had some testing results and I wish I can just thinking in my brain. Give me a second. There's the terpenes are quite high, and the lady asked me, "What were you doing?" She goes, "What are your terpenes? Are through the roof." I also do a total darkness for a couple of weeks. I control my relative humidity in my room, everything, and I turn up my lights. And I've looked at different ways. I've done that now for the last year and a bit. I'm about 4 crops now, and I'm actually seeing those terpenes higher by doing a 2-week light. So I do a full water, not feed, sorry, full water, turn the lights up. I have that room completely controlled for humidity and temperature, of course, and no lights on. And then I go in there just before they dry out completely. I cut them down and hang them. And that's been that next little extra push on those terpenes completely. I've really seen a big change in that. And I hope you guys will, make sure that room is controlled. You cannot do that. If you do not have a controlled room, you will cause mold. You will cause problems. Please do not do this unless you're doing this and you know what you're trying to do. And I have no problem. I test things and I'm willing to always fail because that's how you learn. 20% of the problem, 80% of the solution. So these are the things that I've been able to find through time and what I've been doing. And that's just my hallucinations of how I've been able to kind of work towards what I need for myself. Hope that gives you an idea what I've done with the same strain. And I've been growing with all different lights, Medi Kush, everybody knows my strain, the same strain for the last over a decade and a bit. And between lights and nutrients, living soils by far is the more flavor. LEDs, of course, I'm using it because I like the far red. I like those deep reds that give me that. So it's and organic. You guys all know that, right? It's organic's the way to go to get the flavors. Hang dry. I mean, and add the biology into your soils and gold living soil. Like we got to grow for the future, and we can't do that with bottled nutrients and stuff like that. And really understanding that curing and using proper light recipes and multiple spectrums and how we can cut down on just this overall and be self-sufficient. This is key importance, and this is why I love doing what I do, and I get the joy from you guys. Thank you for allowing me to share that. And
John, thanks. You touched on a bunch of things that I'm really interested in. One of the ones I think for me, I'll touch on the organic thing in a second, but the light dep, the last 2 weeks, that's interesting because a lot of people there's the bro science aspect of it where people are doing it for like a day, 48 hours, and that's not enough.
3 weeks.
Yeah, and so like, have you actually, do you have measurements on that by any chance?
I've got some stuff I've been looking at and get some testing done a little bit. So it's kind of, I'm always trying to get the next. Of course, I'm getting more help with some people looking at it because it's I've had some people looking at what I'm testing for me because everything does cost.
Yeah, I mean, I would love to see any data that you're willing to share because
yeah, for sure,
I would just love to see that. Yeah. I think I put my contact information earlier in the chat here. And then I'll send it to you actually in a second. But in terms of organic versus inorganic, one of the things that I have noticed is that there's a lot of confusion between organic and sustainable and a healthy microflora environment. And I think that absolutely having the microflora and the soil bacteria and the right soil bacteria and the right soil fungi are the most important aspect of what organic farming sort of set out to do. If you use the right balance of nutrients and the right form of nutrients, you can achieve those results with sort of so-called non-organic nutrients, and it really is more about keeping the soil healthy and not just overloading it with really heavy salts and leading to oversalting and no nutrient imbalance in the soil. So I think that's an important distinction. I think people, I would like people to start experimenting with, perhaps sustainable non-organic nutrients as well, and to do tests on that and see if you can achieve the same balance by just making sure that you have the right nutrients in the right form available to those microbes to then liberate them for the plant at a consistent, sustainable rate. And I think that would be a really nice experiment to try.
I mean, I'd like to speak to that a bit. Like, there's a couple things, I've grown across the spectrum for sure, and I'm definitely a living soil guru. So that, you know, I've self-proclaimed I'm into it. I'm really into it for sustainability reasons. But I feel like there's something which we can't scientifically prove, but all of our mouths will verify, that is the living soil stuff, hands down, comes out 100% better. It's better for the way it is in your body. It's better for the way it tastes. Even the most hardcore guys running really tight, really nice games will say, man, your shit is better. I know, and they'll go, but I get better yield, or, you know what I mean? They'll have their reasons for why they stick doing their thing, but they'll always say your shit's a little bit better, you know? And there's a lot of factors. I agree with what you're saying in large part, Nick, that a lot of folks are messing their new game up, and they could dial it in, and they need to have the ability to have some biology in there. That's a big difference. And some of these new companies will actually have probiotics that they add in, and those are like a lot better tasting. You know, they're closer, but they don't hit the same homeostasis thing. And there's also a genetic thing too. And I wonder if Johnny B experienced this. So like when I take in different cuts, and I've noticed this for decades, like if I take in a cut, you know, let's say from a guy who's been running synthetics for years, it'll take me 2, 3, 4 cycles with growing that plant, and until that plant knows how to use those organic nutrients. And it's literally in the cell walls of the plant. Like it takes time for the plant to get the right microbes inside the cell walls to where it can really metabolize and fucking crank. And that's in the seed and through the clone. It can take a little bit on some lines. That being said, I have a line in ATF that has never, and I've had this thing for like 15 years. It has never shown me the best. It shows the best quality when grown in synthetics under HPS. I've had it for 10 years. I've fucked with an LED, HPS, living soils, you know, I've done all the things, and this one just loves to have a drain to waste HPS fucking hot game. And it you know what I mean? So there's a genetic component. There's a number of things going on there. But I think everyone in the room, most people, I won't speak for them, agree that there's something in the mouth that we can't scientifically say and quantify that living soil done proper, cured proper, is hands down better.
I would say we can't scientifically prove it yet. But
Sure.
One of the things the reason I'm not doing a lot of the work that I'm trying to do is not to remove the artistry or to do that. It's more just to quantify whatever we can so that we can grow what we want, you know, and learn from that. And it's interesting when you mentioned about your ATF, because one of the things that back to what John was saying earlier, you know, one of the reasons that living soil is so good is that you have a consistent infusion of complex organic soups, basically. And I don't mean organic in terms of the TM organic farming system. I mean just like organic compounds. And as those degrade, they'll release different micronutrients consistently over time. And so I think that the micronutrients and feeding the soil is absolutely the best way you can do things. And that's the way that agriculture should be moving, and is moving, thankfully, finally. And it's, you know, feed the soil and you get better plants out of it. The way you feed the soil is up to you. And you will see differences depending on the intensivity of your fertilization, and even what forms those come in. But the sort of what I'm saying is that the higher the biodiversity, the higher the complexity of the system, the more resilient it is, and the more the more resilient it is to change and to shifts. It has a better buffering capacity, if you will, not necessarily from a chemical perspective, but sometimes, but more from a resistance to change, and that's healthy. There's a seminal paper in sort of sensory agriculture that came out in the early 2000s, looking at Sauvignon grapes in the Marlborough Valley of New Zealand. And what they found is that the absolute best aromatics came from vineyards, and particularly sides of vineyards that were closer to unfarmed wild land. And they were getting this migration of microbes and also obviously from some multicellular, or some like bugs and stuff like that were bringing in this biodiversity that led to a significantly and measurably different and higher level of VOCs in these in the grapes and in the wines that were produced from them. And I mean, that just to me speaks to the fact that, you know, the higher the biodiversity and the more sort of the healthier the soil, the more complex that ecosystem is, the more complex production of organic compounds and aromatics that you're going to get. And so I think I think we're agreeing that you know, the more complexity and the healthier the soil system is, and the healthier the microenvironment is, the better the product is going to be, and the safer it is for the grower to maintain that
100%
system.
agree. I mean, I feel like we could also agree that like, you know, the more times the thing is eaten, you know what I mean? Like if I throw an alfalfa meal down on the topsoil and let it be consumed by the microbes versus if I feed it to my goat and then take that goat poop and process it through a compost, you know, the more times you can get things eaten and shat, you create diversity and achieve that is one aspect. You know, I agree totally with what you're saying.
And I mean, and sort of along those lines, like if you continuously feed the same regimen, you're going to be training your environment to subsist on those inputs. And so you can do it both ways. You can do like really consistent regimen of the same things, and you'll probably get a fairly stable environment that will produce consistent results. And this is about consistency, and this is what the 800-pound mantra. I don't actually know your name, sir. I'm sorry. Sorry, I can't hear you.
Addison.
Okay,
Addison.
Thanks, man. Good stuff. The like what Addison was saying is that consistency is key. Now you could go the opposite direction and feed, looking at the micronutrients and the macronutrients, and feed multiple different sources of those things continuously to try to promote an even larger biodiversity and a flexibility in nutrient uptake and nutrient consumption for that system. And I think there's probably some it'd be interesting to compare results from both of those approaches.
I'd like to jump in here for a second. That I'm loving this conversation. The first part I wanted to talk about was the idea of creating your own inputs. There's a bunch of reasons that I think that's a really good idea. But the idea of biodiversity in your garden, particularly if you're able to work outdoors or in living soil or even in greenhouses, is I would point to the whole field of study called Korean natural farming, JDAM, indigenous microorganisms, etc., which is just a way of culturing the organisms that are flourishing in the soil you have, not in your garden, but around your garden. To your point, Nick, about seeing better results from grapes near the edge of a vineyard as versus in the middle of it, because the microorganisms that are in the wildland, if you will, have a chance to get into the vineyard and add to the diversity of the microscopic life that's happening there. And I think that one of the memories I have, I believe it was on Hash Church a while back, we talked about terpenes, and someone was here presenting the idea that while genetics have something to play in the genetic expression, in the expression of terpenes in cannabis, that the microorganisms that are in the root zone, as well as on the leaf surfaces and within the plant itself, also trigger terpene response from the plant. And I tend to think of it that the cannabis plant, at least part of why it's creating these terpenes, is for its own needs. We enjoy them, but they are at least partially about a defense mechanism to discourage things that eat plants from eating the leaves of this plant. But there's also, of course, that whole, the terpenes and their effects in our body and why we cultivate them. So I'll stop there. Go ahead.
Mark? I was just going to say, just as a way to encourage interactions with pollinators, which us humans are. So the cannabis plant and all plants for that matter, and all insects for that matter, live in a world called chemical ecology. It's a whole branch of chemistry that describes the chemical language that exists between different organisms, including plants and insects. And what's truly amazing when you look at like the chemicals that insects use to communicate with, they're the same, some of the same molecules that are in plants. And so some of the same biochemical pathways and some of the same signals that are responsible for those molecules in plants are also in insects. I'll just end by saying this, when we worked on this project with catmint, we had not realized the importance that catmint has in, it is a good insect repellent, but it's a lacewing attractant, right? And lacewings are the good ones.
Well, that's
So
Mark.
Yeah,
that's a hugely important point, because it's not only just for pollinators, but it's also for predators. And so what'll happen?
There's this whole communication that's happening there, and I think humans, right, Wade, right, we're involved in that communication, because it's like there's insects, there's plants, there's people, right? Then there's the earth. But I think, just to go back to the chemical communication again, that's really cool, is that when you look at certain varieties and susceptibility to either insect or microbial attack, whether it's fungal or by microbes or whatever, there is a chemical basis for certain varieties that are resistant. And that all has to do with, again, terpene makeup. I would assume the other chemicals also play a role, but I think the terpene makeup has a big role. And we were talking before too about microbial influence too on terpenes. You have to admit too that, again, the hallmark of microbial degradation is oxidation, because that's what microbes want to do. They want to oxidize things when they eat things. So sometimes, like when you look at El Sole's papers, and he identifies all of these new cannabinoids, they're basically microbial degradation products of moldy weed down at Ole Miss, right? It's basically what it comes down to. So, so in its pristine form, yes, cannabinoids and terpenes in general are metastable compounds, so they have to be preserved. And it's interesting, Addison, what you were saying about this notion of, well, you can't keep it as flour, so make it into hash. And we need to have that as Hash Church's campaign here on the internet. Let's turn all of this stale weed into hash. Let's do it on a worldwide basis. Have this hash.
You can't take money to the grave with you, but you can take hash.
You guys, I want to be buried in a hash casket. I have to write that into my will.
That's the truth of it. Is Addison, what you were saying earlier is the truth. Hash, once you make it into that form, and I know Marcus, he's been a big proponent of this for a really long time. Is the more hash you make, is you can freeze it, you can keep it, you can pull it out of the freezer, you can use it at any point in time, and it has longevity.
Yep.
And resin done well with the right amount of resin to particulate ratios can last a very long time.
Yeah. Hash is like Walt Disney's head. If you freeze it, keep that shit forever, man. That's not,
no doubt.
Not going anywhere.
Preservation is real for sure. And that's why the supply chain conversation that Nick brought up is so very, very, very important. I think that lots of critics of what's going on in the legal market in Canada, I get it. There's many companies growing boof, and there's companies not processing correctly, but there are also great people who are from the legacy market growing really nice product, and there are people processing really nice product. But if I kept my hash at minus 20 degrees the entire time I had it, then I sent it out in jars and it went to the warehouse in the OCS, and it sat for 3 days in the summer at 100 degrees Fahrenheit in their warehouse. And, as Addison was saying, when you remove the nitrogen, oxygen and replace with nitrogen, it degrades very, very quickly. Well, if you keep hash stored for 6 months plus at minus 20 degrees Celsius, and then you go to 100 degrees Fahrenheit, it literally cooks the hash. I mean, the hash was reddish black. It was from being a white powder, it just turned into this smeared red black powder. or black gum. And man, it's like we took a lot of hits from people going, oh, they're selling bunk and it's not that good. And there really is something to be said for a good product can be destroyed with a bad supply chain.
Yep.
Or, that, I mean, it's packaging too. It's every component is so important. And that's why, I think as we progress, like every other industry has, that has less barriers, you will solve these problems, and great companies will come forward and introduce these products, and new pioneers will be made. And it's just kind of, it's the exciting part about what's next in what we do, because everything's come so far. But I mean, it's even with Legends, like for example, every single entry that comes into Legends goes immediately into a chest freezer, and it stays in that chest freezer until it gets, as we make the kits for the judges, those are all in free. It's like everything's protected. And the reason is because it's our job to give it to the person who comes up to the hash bar in the same format that it was turned in as an entry. It's very important, because now we're talking about solventless hash. It could be melt, it could be dry sift, it could be rosin. And we just want to make sure that it's that maker is getting, we're presenting that maker, we're representing them at that moment that we hand that over to them. And I expect there to be a lot of people with coolers, and we're going to be giving out ice packs for people and replenishing ice packs while we're there, because it is solventless and people want to protect it. And, you want that, you don't bring it all with you, but now you're getting it. So we want to make sure that it's protected. And we even thought about like going to Pelican or like, not Pelican, but going to like one of the bigger cooler companies and being like, hey, do you want to be a sponsor? Like we have this product that has to stay cold. And I don't think we're ready for that kind of stuff yet, but all this great work all the way through the process at so many different points can break down and change and destroy the art, destroy the work that somebody did because of supply chain. Supply chain isn't just the supply of the material that's being used. It's also that material getting itself to the market and getting out there to the consumer. And it's everything. It really is. Like if people are bored in cannabis right now and you want to find a new direction, supply chain is a very interesting one, and it pays pretty well. It's actually like a nice place to be. There's not as much, I'm probably going to regret saying this, but there's not as much, competition and craziness in that space, because everyone's focused on being the rock star, or, the other guy that's doing the other thing. So, but it is important. And I've seen it many times. Like I'm sure, Marcus, people were getting that hash and being like, I always knew Bubble Man was full of shit. Like, this is trash. They want to quickly jump at you and talk some shit or something too, with the way culture is now. So no, that's
what it looked like. That's what it looked like when it left my facility.
Oof.
Okay. And now I'll show you what it looks like now after it sat at the OCS for 3 days in a jar. So now this was taken with a macro. So if I showed it to you out, not in the macro, you can still see the quality is there.
I'm not really mad,
but I'm telling you,
I mean, it's the
left out.
Yes, and then
I'll show you what it looked like without. Well, it's a lot of volatile organic compounds. Yes, exactly.
A ton of VOCs are gone.
Well, Addison, like we were saying earlier, so like what we need is a farm to face supply chain control. And to your thing for Legends, do you offer advice for the supplier, for the growers who are submitting for judging and stuff? Do you say, actually, this is how we want you to pack it to show off your stuff the best?
It's all about
But do you give them a standard so everybody's getting judged equally?
Well, we explain to them that it's important to us that we're putting their product the way they present it to us exactly to whoever's coming up to that hash bar to try it. So, to every attendee. So it's really, we have that conversation with them about, hey, here's the dates. Here's, it's called weights and dates. And it's like, this is the weights of everything. Here's all the dates, important dates. Here's all the other information. And that's a big part of it, is like, what are you turning in? Are you doing 1 or 2 entries? What are these entries? Because it could be rosin. This year it's melt or dry sift or rosin. So there's 3 different categories that are all judged separately, and there'll be awards for each one in each category. So it's all completely split up. So we do have the conversation with them. Hey, you're entering a melt? Great. let's talk about how, that's coming in or how we're getting that. And here's the dates that it has to be here. So, because there's a jar sponsor, Calyx Containers sponsors all the jars, because we feel like that jar is it's the best jar. We have melt since that jar was first introduced to the market that we put into those jars and had, and it's still good. And I just smoked some yesterday and it was fire. And it's, so we really appreciate that jar. We think there's a lot of thought that goes into it, including the film that's added to the jar to cover the top of the jars on the inside. So we do a lot of different stuff that's all sort of in line with exactly what I'm talking about, making sure from the jar to the way it's treated to how they give it to us, that it's presented exactly that way to whoever's going to look at the bottom of the jar, see the sticker. That's the other thing. Legends isn't blind. Each company puts their logo and their strain name and possibly the breeder and possibly the farmer on the bottom of that jar. So every single one that you look at, oh, that's what it looked like afterward. Is that what that is, Mark?
This, by the way, is 14-year-old Master Kush bubble hash. If everyone's wondering why it's so dark, sorry that it's not the blonde, but this is a perfect example of hash that the volatile organic compounds have changed completely. They're the most different. This stuff tastes like perfume. It's so strong. I don't even know how, because it's just been in this jar. It was out on my table for years, but it sealed itself in a way where those compounds somehow transformed and preserved without a freezer. I have not seen that happen many times personally, but it is just as you were talking, I thought I would show a few things, and that particular hash is extremely special. So I wanted to mention too, we're having this conversation and we're wondering what can we do, to sort of bring this to the people. Julie's like, how do we get these people? Well, we have events, and that's what the Legends of Hash event is all about down in Los Angeles. That's what Julie's Collector's Cup, which we'll talk about in a little bit, that's happening up here in Canada. When you have something like Legends and you're inviting the best growers, we were asked when we were interviewed the other day, like, oh, what's the equality outcome? Like, how are you guys making it like equal for all? And we're like, oh, it's not. We're completely prejudiced. We don't care what the people look like, but we're prejudiced about what the hash looks and smells like. That's what this event is. It's not an equality event. It's an event to make sure whoever you are, whatever walk of life you come from, that you bring what you think is going to be that great thing to the table. And that's that sort of community of hashish aficionados getting together, and why the growers are so important. And hey, you know what? Put your money where your mouth is. We don't have to argue about, organic regenerative is better than salt, although I think a lot of us feel that way. But at the same time, Nick had me really thinking. I appreciate his scientific mind, because he's certainly not saying salts are better. He's just saying, is there a way that we can, it's almost like a conversation about medicine, and you've got your Western medicine and you've got your Eastern medicine. Well, don't we know that the best version is both of those together? We're always dividing. Not that I'm saying people that are organic and regenerative farmers need to be pumping salt. That's not what I'm saying. Try not to hear that. I'm just saying that the possibility that there's value on both sides, and understanding, feeding your soil what it needs, can be learned from both sides. And if it can bring you to a place that pulls those two sides together, it's very hard for a bird to fly with one wing. So when we have both wings of that bird, we get what we call, that just beautiful flowing state. Those are just a few things I wanted to say.
I couldn't agree more. I mean, that's
Well said.
that's what I set out to do with the Regen conference, and I felt like we made a little dent in that, that all compost is not equal. Not by no means is compost equal, and not all microbes are equal. By no means. Like we try to really incorporate, let's focus on the individual parts of the science of this. Let's focus on testing, and let's get down to where regenerative to me really is using less. And if we're just aimlessly throwing carbon and nitrogen at the product, at the problem, rather than saying, oh, we're lacking this through a leaf tissue test and adding it micro through a foliar, I think I didn't mean to come off so hot, Nick, earlier. I just kind of can be a little hot Italian, but I do.
Dude, you came across passionate, not hot at all. You came across as loving, listen, I will defend my organic
I will not
living
hear less.
soils. I am into this shit.
Oh, it's cold in Washington already, so he's fired
Oh
up.
yes.
Okay, guys, I want to share something with you guys. I met this gentleman, Gary, at this event I was at, and this guy's so into what we're talking about, and I want to play this for you guys. See if you can hear him. Can you hear it? No?
Nope.
Okay, I'm going to share this with you guys personally then, okay? So what's going to happen is I'm going to send this off to Josh and Nick, and this guy here is all about what we're talking about on a mask. And this was such an awesome conversation. I just want to be able to share this with you guys. So when I get a chance, I'm going to have a meeting with this gentleman, and he's exactly what you're talking about on a massive thing. There's some new creations that they came up with. I filmed him talking about what you're talking about, but I will share it with you guys and somehow share it with the group here someday. It's 2
Post
minutes.
it on Hash Church, man, in the forum.
There you go. I'll post it on Hashish. Gary will love this, and he's just an amazing individual. I know Wade, you and him would probably be like best friends, honestly, on that farming end and about regenerative for the soils and the biology. He wants to do things on the rainforest on the edge as they're coming into it. He's doing some pretty amazing things on an international level, and this is just a conversation for you like-minded individuals to work with a gentleman like this. So thank you for allowing me to share that, and I will continue on what you're talking about. Please, I was excited that we were in that. Yeah, you guys are awesome.
So, hey, I got to jump off in about 30 minutes, Marcus. But if you wanted to talk about Legends, or if there was questions or anything else about this year, I'd love to be able to.
Yeah, you know what? I want to get back to this conversation for sure, but we got a little bit of time, and Legends is pretty important. So let's talk about that for a little bit. I want to make time to talk about Julie's and the Cannareps Collectors Cup as well. It's happening here in Canada in 3 cities. But let's start off with Legends and just a little bit of information for everyone. Mostly what everyone asks is how they can get a ticket. That's usually where it starts, and so maybe you could let the answer out.
Yeah, that's the biggest question. The answer to it is that I think as organizers and producers of it, we look at that as the hardest decision to make, is who can actually be on that list and who can come that year, from the maker all the way into the attendees that get to come. We were able to alleviate that issue a little bit this year by introducing all the judging and giving the judges essentially 21 hours to judge. And the judges are the makers. So it came down to, we had to put a system in place and have that set so that we can move through the steps of not just creating these lists, but then reaching out to these people and confirming them on this list, and then collecting payments, and then all the same time organizing the sponsors, because our job is to not just put on an event, but figure out how to monetize it correctly with the culture and involve it in the culture. And that means to involve sponsors, but they have to be very specific sponsors. It can't just be, the biggest dabber producer. It's like, no, let's look at Mystic Timbers, which is one of the longest sitting, dabber producers that is a family owned company, and all these different things that go into selecting the sponsors, all the way down into then you start moving through the process. What we introduced is we do the lists early. So the list of makers, we get that decided on as early as possible. As the year's kind of maturing, we're already sitting there doing posts and doing stuff to figure out that list and who's going to be involved. We're looking at the winners of other events, other things like that, qualifiers, and then being able to put them on the list. Second is the guest list or the attendee list. And half of the first night dinner list is really the guest of the maker. So you have 40 makers, then those 40 makers get a guest, which puts an 80-person guest list up. We only have 150 people the first night. So we have about 70 people that then are coming in at an attendee, a 2-day attendee list. The way we build that list is the same way. We start early, and we're putting people in there that are, it's mainly the owners of some of these sponsors, the biggest sponsors, that fit really well with the culture, or other, producers, manufacturers that don't enter contests, but they're definitely a big part of the culture, from the, product side to the merch side to whatever it might be. Artists, other people that just are really part of the culture. But then the second qualifier for that person is do they consume a lot of hash? Because this isn't just, you know, it's not to say that any event is just, but you know, this isn't a small event. It's over $100,000 in production. There's a lot that goes into it, and those sponsors make that possible. So we want to make sure that the experience for every single attendee, from the maker all the way down to the, you know, the second day brunch attendee, has a really full experience, and it's overwhelmingly fulfilling. You know, the concept this year, and same as last year, is that it's an open hash bar. That's not an open dab bar. That's an open hash bar. And people can't even wrap their head around the concept where you go up to the bar and you say, hey, I'd like to sample from the menu or sample from the entries. And it's just a quick, here you go, here's the next 5 or 6 entries to try. And, you know, those are 1/4 gram entries, you know, servings, but there's enough to go back and sit down and try some stuff and mosey back up to the line and get some more and have that real open feel. Like when I went to Legends, that's how it was. We walked up and there was stuff on the table, and I cut a little piece of this and pulled a little piece of that and put it on a paper plate and circled it and, you know, did the whole dance and did that and kind of got to experience the product with the people. You could then sit down next to, you know, whoever and say, hey, like, man, this is awesome. Like, that's the same experience that we're trying to create. So the hash is all dispersed that way. The makers get a kit, and then the makers have access to a 1/2 gram entry size. So we keep the bar that way. There's a lanyard. Everything this year, because we added judging, we have a blockchain that we created with the partnership that's on the Web3. Have our own blockchain, our own coin. There's a DAO, everything that exists there, and it's all for the hash and glass community. So we use that and created a format so that we can have all of our judging on Web3. It's all transparent. We can publish it after. Everyone can look at it and see who judged and what they judged. And then that way, it's a system that we can then, you know, Legends, Marcus and myself can turn to anyone else, and Dave, and we could turn and say, hey, here's our platform, you know, to Emerald Cup or anyone else. You can use this. The person who's using it just goes into their phone, uses a sliding scale, and gets to fine tune the actual judging. So it eliminates more possibility of ties and things like that. So we built a system. It's on your phone. It's completely secure. It's 100% publishable. It's very transparent. So that's another part that we've kind of added this year is the judging. And that's why the second day exists. But only the makers will judge, and they'll judge one another. That's best way to do it, because it eliminates any issue of, like, you know, a coup that's all voting for so-and-so for some reason. So it's, I think it's going to be, you know, it's bigger this year. It's much larger. It's a 400-person venue, but we'll only have 250 or 275 people there max. Which is, you know, gives us much more room for, you know, our sponsors to have booths outside. And the outside has more of a, you know, a little bit of a trade show feel, but then the inside has more of an intimate seating, very comfortable, large farm tables. You know, we feel like that's the most sturdy table that we can get and the largest seating space we can have together. There's no ropes. There's no excluded sections that are roped off or anything like that. Everyone's there together. The only specific area for seating is the sponsor seating area, and that's closer to the outside, so that those guys are able to get more quickly in and out and enjoy the experience as well. So you know, we have the lanyards and the laminates this year again, and we'll qualify the different you know, attendees with those, as well as, you know, now your ticket is an NFT. It will be on your phone through a Kepler wallet, and you'll show that when you come in, and then that qualifies who the person is, what they're there for, whether they're going to be a judge. And then also, oh, go ahead. Oh, I thought someone was saying something. But yeah, that's the whole thing.
I would add something, Addison. What you guys are doing is a lot harder than what I did, because I did Legends from this purely heart place. It came from this pure aficionados place, which I don't doubt we're still coming from that same place. But to monetize it was the thing I was just always too afraid to do. And when we had our conversation about, like, look, like, you can't just keep paying for this out of your pocket, dude. Like, this is fucking mental. Like, people want to come to this event. They want to enjoy the hash. They want to popularize new strains and flavors. They want to have this experience in the culture. And one of the things you didn't really talk about, because you were so into talking about this future, which is actually pretty incredible, the Kepler wallet and the NFT and the whole way the transparency of the competition works. So you take away that sort of temptation of like, oh, let's just sell the first, like what people inevitably do when they build something big, right? You have to like preserve it in the early days and the foundation of it to make sure that it doesn't get bastardized, which is a very hard thing. And I'm sure there's already people who went to the original Legends who are like, oh, they took sponsorships and now you're allowing cameras. It's just not the same anymore. No, it's not the same anymore, but it is same, but different. If you've ever been to Thailand, it's still going to have its soul of Legends, but we're going to allow more people to be involved. And it's just like the same thing. And people always say, oh, it's selling out. Well, it's the, at one point in time, you have to monetize it and get it. Do you want to just have Legends with 40 people every year? Or do you want to do Legends where maybe some thousands of people can experience it? Do you want to make it so, you're growing weed for like the 10 people in your neighborhood? Or do you want to make it so you could touch people on the other side of the country to taste your flavors as well? So this is kind of the difficulty as we get older. We come from the roots. We're all these activists and we're fighting. And then suddenly one day you realize, oh my gosh, I'm running a business and it's incorporated and I've got to do all of these different things to preserve it. It's an interesting kind of situation, but I feel that Legends is in good hands with you guys and with myself as well. And I'm just excited that, recently Bubba Co from Instagram hit me up and started sending me pictures from Afghanistan. And am I frozen?
No, you're good.
You're good.
Okay. And he said, I've been writing all these articles about preserving the culture in Afghanistan, but the Taliban is searching for me and I had to leave the country. And I thought, whoa, so this is another part of Legends, the roots. So I say, well, can we publish some of your stories? Can we make some placards for Legends of Hash with your words? Can we use some of your pictures? And, he's just like, yes, of course. Yes, I want that. So the circle of hashish that I sent Addison the other day in Afghanistan, he sent me this photo just to share it really quick. And I'm hoping on getting some of these photographs. This is the circle of hashish Baba Co, taken last year in Afghanistan, where they gather and join and they smoke all this hash inside this little chamber. And so I love the idea that here's this guy, he's got Instagram, but he's looking for a place to preserve these stories and get these photos seen by a group of people that actually have an appreciation for hashish. And here it is going to be Legends of Hash. The event is more than just some event. It's also the preservation of our culture and the cultures of hashish. And we can't, it's not about picking one or the other. It's about preserving them all in the most authentic way that we can, while continuing to grow that culture in the world we live in today, and honoring and praising the genetics and the growers who spend their time and spend months and months of variables to produce these incredible flavors for the hash makers to then come along and process with the utmost care and love and gentleness to bring to an event. I mean, a hash bar that you can walk up to from the menu and just, oh, give me a quarter gram of that and a quarter gram of this and give me 2 quarter grams of that. That is something I want to see more of. So if you had anything else to say, Addison, feel free to say it, but I've said my piece.
Well, you can see more of it. I have a ticket for you if you want to come down, of course. So that would be awesome to have. I mean, I know, could maybe just cut a mustache or something.
I think we can get you down, buddy. I think we can do it.
Got a big car. Hey, Addison, on the Legends, and Marcus, thank you for that perspective. That's great. A couple things on the Legends. Are you guys anonymizing the samples for judges?
No.
Using codes?
Nope.
Okay. No, just ask. That was just a question. And then secondly, and more importantly, how does one get a judging spot if they're not a maker, or should I just start making?
So there's 5. So whatever, I think we're never going to go above 40. I think 40 is like a great way to have the room. We may go less, definitely not more. So I think it's, that's a good number. So because it's a good number, because it sort of hits there, we want to make that an odd number. So we add 5 judges that we consider respected by the 40 makers. guys that really know their shit, that are kind of what you're talking about, like not necessarily the maker, but maybe Scott Deppy, and not necessarily the maker, but maybe JP Toro and, Lot Comedy, guys that smoke a lot of hash and have smoked hash and know the culture and know all the makers and know everybody and can kind of sit in that room. And again, 60 entries in 21 hours and being able to give your full opinion on those 60, however that may be, whatever process you use. But I look at it as familiarity. Like all of the people that are judging are incredibly familiar with the entire process. They dab, they're dabbing 3.5 grams a day, 3 grams a day, 2 grams a day on the daily. That's just part of what they're putting into themselves and how much exposure they have to hash. And that's kind of why that maker's list, that judge list is so small, that you have to have that exposure in order to be able to do that, in order to pull it off. And what's crazy about this is I've seen this multiple times before. When it's honestly done and you look at the results, it's across the board. You can see it sort of uniformly. If you pick the right judges, you could see it uniformly in those judges where they're all, someone may bring something from left field here and there, but you can tell that nothing's fixed. And you're like, oh, okay, look at these. Oh shit, look at the judging. It actually is favoring and not favoring the entries that came in. You can see that in a lot of it. And that means that you pick the right kind of judges and you had that. And there's 18 months of thought that goes into, and then the rechurning and kind of putting together the process from what we did last year. We took feedback from all of the makers that came last year. And then we said, okay, can we implement these things and still keep it in line with culture while we monetize it, while we, continue to give thanks back to and telling the story of hashish and the history of it? How do we do that? And, it's even the way we put the tickets out. The second day, the brunch has 75 tickets that can go out for that day. Well, that gives us an opportunity now to bring in makers that we weren't able to get on the list, to bring in glass shop owners that really help push the culture by selling the glass and putting that stuff out and consuming a lot of hash. Like every single person that's there consumes a lot of hash. There's no question about that. All 250 people are hand selected. We go through and look at every single person. We're either putting their name on the list to start, or we're getting their name and then reviewing it and kind of vetting it and putting it in. So it's like Marcus says, it's a sifting through the heads of all these people and then putting together that perfect 90, 120 that's just kind of, oh, fuck, and that's when we're putting it together, our whole, like OKR, like outcomes and key results, what we're really looking for is for that person to stand there in the room, for any person in the room to walk in and be standing at any point and look around and take it in and be like, you got to be fucking kidding me. Like, how the fuck is this even possible now? Like, from the place that they get to sit to the entire design of the motif that's there. It's all Moroccan, all, flowing curtains and pillows and floor seating, all these different things and lamps and lighting, and everything is all to bring that to life in this large space, indoor and outdoor. Like the outdoor tents have rugs and other stuff laid down and seating. So it's really, very, very solid experience. And the food, the first night is all Lebanese meal, full spread of Lebanese from a caterer that can do the whole rib for us. And then the second day is a prime rib brunch. They'll be cutting the prime rib there, and then we'll have eggs and everything else for brunch that's available. A full coffee bar that's totally free that you can get lattes and all that different stuff. And I think they'll have, like, Marcus, they'll have the Legends of Hashish logo on all the lattes. So when you get your latte, it'll be like the Legends logo on it. They can do some different ones, which is pretty cool. So we'll have that all the way into bakery, all the pastries and the bakery stuff that's there for brunch. And then for the first time, we'll have a Legends Award ceremony. And for the first time, we'll actually have media. So we've invited Bearded Brothers media to do all of our online media stuff with us, digital stuff that'll be out there. And then we've invited Senti Magazine as our, in print, if that's sort of a thing anymore, really, which is crazy. But we selected those guys. We think they're great. We love working with Ron and those guys, and Jennifer, who's there. So that's who's covering the media. Then we ourselves have a pretty extensive media team that's going to capture running up to Legends with the intake, all the way into the, the post-production or pre-production of the event, into the event, covering all the stuff that's there very creatively too. They have, creating, like taking light tables, lighting up a space, and then being smart enough to showcase the glass rigs that will be in the room that day, and then have them come in and hit off the rigs and do videos in that one space. And then we do micro photography on all of the entries. That happens days before the event. After everything's turned in, we start that process and get photography for the post-production of the entire event. It'll all be in, unfortunately, this is how it is now, but everything will be in snips. These produced reels that will have all of the media. And here's some of the stuff from last year, the entry stuff. And we'll use the same photographer this year, Zoom photography, that did everything for us last year. So those are some of the great ones. Yeah. Feeling Frosties, Jealousy Cross. So nice. So yeah, so we'll have capture this year on all the entries. We'll have media there covering stuff. Everyone's allowed to have their phone this year, so there should be a lot more activity on social media and things like that as well. And yeah, it's, again, it's a private dinner. It's totally private. It's a completely closed, system that we put in place to make sure that we're having a private dinner and everybody who's there is invited. And it's also just a really well curated room of people. So it's 2 days this year. It's going to be a lot of fun. We'll have awards. We decided that instead of producing an award that someone has, that's kind of this thing that sits around or does whatever, we thought it would be better to, a better situation to work with the sponsors and build gift baskets for first place, second place, and third place in each category with different unique products from those guys like Terp Sous Vide. And, there's a lot of different ones that have these great products that we can then put together from, a custom slurper from Toro or a custom glass, sculpture from Mothership. All that stuff will be, the first place winners will have a bunch of different things, like a cornucopia of stuff that they're getting from the companies. Yeah, there's a nice slurper. Yeah, JP Toro is one of the sponsors with Toro Glass. Mothership's a sponsor. It's a crazy list. It's Terp Sous Vide, Banger Basket, Little Lake Valley Seed Code, Masonic, Mystic Timbers, Octave, Mothership, 710 Merch, Alien Labs, Toro Glass, Fidel, Agritech, Glob Mops, Focus V, and Carta, Highly Educated, Rosin Evolution, Clean Pumps, Ancillary, Apex Ancillary, Alchemy Jars, Mills. There's even probably a couple more too. I think Cali X just got in sponsorship in today. So it's all brands that fit really well, that are part of our culture, Banger Basket and these like cool companies that are part of our culture that are just help make up a great event too. So that's every table has Banger Baskets on it. There's ISO, there's butane, there's all the things you need. You really just need to bring your rig, bring your torch and your other stuff, but all the other little details that are needed are there. There's a lot of different companies that are doing drops that are exclusive to the event, from their mood mats to their teas and other things like that. So from the makers all the way into some of the other people. And then, the art component, which is all done by our, in-house through Howdy on Instagram, who does all of our stuff for us, including our poster that we just released for this year's Legends. And then Lot Comedy is working with us on, he's a hash, dead culture, cannabis culture guy who's an artist. And he's kind of helping us, cover that component and make that a big part of the event too. So we have some other surprises that we've kind of put together with him. Yeah, and there's this year's poster, and there's a ton of hidden stuff in it, a bunch of different symbolisms and other cool things. So, but yeah, we'll have Lot Comedy is also going to be presenting and have on site a bunch of art, and then Mothership's doing the GZ1 drop, which is the hash rules everything around me drop with GZ1. So that should be pretty cool. Yeah, there's no music. We have a DJ.
You're making me want to come, dude. I'm not going to lie.
Bro, you should be there with us. You should definitely be there with us. I don't know why you wouldn't. That would be the greatest surprise ever. And there's we have a seed breeders lounge that's outside with the two booths with all this 4 seed breeders in them. And they're hash seed breeders. We wanted to make sure we had that component there. While people are there, they can mosey up and talk about what's happening next year, what's there this year. One of my favorite things is that if you have makers from all over the country, those guys are able to get together and talk more about swapping genetics and doing things that can help push the hash, culture in each area that they live in and where they are. And, also over great food and, good company and just amazing hash. It's really like Marcus said earlier, we did this interview the other day, and it was like, yeah, Legends of Hash cares more about the color of your hash than the color of your skin. It's like, it's just a straight up, like, none of that stuff, it should be in the room. It's not a part of like dividing anybody. It's really about bringing everybody together and saying like, hey, we really don't care about anything other than like, is it a good person that loves hash, that can, wants to dab and wants to enjoy the space and wants to enjoy other people? There's going to be vegans in the room, there's vegetarians in the room, and there's meat eaters in the room. There's, sativa lovers and indica lovers. And, there may be a guy firing up some BHL. You never know. It's like, everyone's welcome. Like, one thing we did do this year is we're making large signs, and any tobacco smoke or flower smoke is to be done outside. The reason for that is so we can preserve that indoor space that we have, where we're all going to be dabbing anyway already, which has ventilation. We just don't want to bring home with us that sort of, extra, carbon and other components when we're judging in the room. I think it's a lot better to not have that in the room if you're judging. So that's one thing. If you go outside, parts per billion breaks it up, and you can probably not have an issue with it. But when you're inside in an inside space, we think it's gives a lot more to your palate and a lot more to what's happening. So there'll be a lot of glass there. Like, that's another big part. Big push last year was for glass and breeders and farmers. This year we're adding and pushing a little harder with the glass side, and Scott Deppy, Mothership's our largest sponsor, and they're coming in and kind of bringing some of the glass industry in with us this year. So they've invited some special guests that'll be there with us both days. So it's kind of, we feel like it's the right room of people. Pretty Chadless, to say the least, that it'll be a Chad-free zone for the whole place, for everyone. And I say that in a joking way too, but it's definitely like, they won't survive. It's like, somebody who's not into the culture and not a part of this is really just not going to enjoy it. And we've already done a lot of work.
Push-up time.
Oh, get in there. We've already made certain that like the list is a select amount of people that we can have there in different, in different levels too, because the second day we love that, because now if we're not able to bring a maker in and put them on that list, which is really hard to do, it's only 40 makers. Now we have the opportunity to invite them at least to come for the brunch. They can get to see what it's all about. They can still share their hash and see everybody and be a part of it, which is cool. And that makes a big difference for helping us make a decision for next year on who's on the list. Oh, is that a marshmallow? Oh, that's pretty cool. But yeah, we could select who's on that list for next year, and then just get to know the makers a little more, depending on who they are. I'm most excited about, if you're an East Coast ticket holder and you're getting to come out from the East Coast and come into California, which is great weather in December, and just kind of extend the good weather and the good vibes and get a good time in California. If you're enjoying that event and, going there, you're getting to be in the room with 60 entries from these 40 makers that you would never see. You can easily identify who the makers are by the jars, and go up and say, hey, this is great. I really love this. I love your product. I'd, like to shake your hand. We wanted them to be able to get those flowers in the room. We don't feel like by putting their name on the bottom of the jar that it's going to affect the group of 40 makers. They're not going to be impressed with the name of another maker. And, the fact that if they're going to vote for themselves, that's another conversation too. It's like we're still figuring that part out. We may make it so that they can't vote for themselves. They actually have to vote for the other makers. And that's pretty easily done. So we have that control in the voting so that it is, like, hey, we want your opinion on this, not to vote for yourself technically. And I don't know if people like or don't like that. I just think that it makes it more fair. It makes it so that every vote is being counted technically at that point. If you vote for yourself, it's just it's expected. You're there. We know you're going to vote for yourself. You're already here with us. Like, you voted for yourself as soon as you walk through the door. Now let's let the judging, let's see who's,
judging, right? Is
yeah,
it?
let's,
Right?
yeah. What's that?
It's not really judging if you're just like, hey, I'm just gonna vote for me because that's my stuff. You know what I mean? I think that's
well, I
not,
mean, it's, you want to keep it as,
you might just have an art event where everyone tries everything and appreciates each other, right?
yep. And then that's what we're trying to promote more of too. We want to know what of the other makers' stuff that was entered that you like the most. We don't want to know whether you like your stuff the most, because we hope that you're putting your best foot forward and you fucking love what you presented. And that's already expected. So, and it's a great way to really be able to get an understanding by letting only the makers be the judges. I think it eliminates anything either. I mean, if every person there was a judge, every attendee, and they got to see which name was on there, then it's a popularity contest. And that's not what we're having. It's not a contest at all. So it's more of, a competition between makers to be able to, in their opinion, what they think is the best, stuff this year. And we do have a lot of makers that are, from last year's list. And then we also have, a number of makers that are new for this year that we've never had before. So it's, it's definitely going to be as fair as possible, as transparent as possible. Even afterwards, people will be able to look and see what was judged and how it won. And I think that stuff's great to document and have so that you can see it and kind of check out what was hot that year. How many things are belched up or this or that. And it gets really exciting. At this time of year, my taste for hash kind of dips because I think my brain knows that all this crazy hash is about to come. And I sort of I'm like, all right, I'm just getting high now, and sort of going through the motions because it's quite overwhelming when you start seeing what's coming in, what's culturally relevant, what's kind of brand new that just came in this year that's going to be getting pushed. So that's kind of like the most exciting part for me is to kind of see that stuff. But yeah, you stay busy.
I admire that about you so much. You have no idea. I also very much at a deep level understand what you're going through. And so the stress and everything is absolutely, you have to balance life, right? As Johnny B was talking about, right? Yes, you can have passion and throw everything you have in terms of your commitment, your will, your vision, what you want to create, right? What change you want to have and make in the future so that it's not about you, but it's about the legend, right? What is the long-term impact of your work, right? So I appreciate that so much. I need to get away to get to you and do this experience. And the reason why I bring it up is because I'm running a cannabis sommelier collector's cup, which is all about the flower. So Legends is hash. This is about the flower. And I know in terms of respecting time from everybody, I'd love to just talk about it at another time if you want to, get on with your day. But I'm also here for you. The one thing I gotta say is I just came up with the marshmallow ashtray. Seriously, it is so cool because I didn't have an ashtray and I have kids. So I was smoking a joint. Even when you put the joint on the marshmallow, it kind of toasts it and it releases this sweet aroma. It's so nice. And then you open it because it's sticky. And then you put the joint inside and then you close it up and then all the moisture, everything gets sucked. No smell.
You can just eat it. Yeah.
I can eat this end. I can eat the butt end.
Yeah, you can eat the whole thing. That's, you can get high off of it now.
The roaches thing, that's not, no, that's not for me. I don't smoke the filter either.
There you go.
But yeah. So I think that's so awesome, man. And one thing I ask from any of you is the next time you smoke flower, okay, if you don't smoke flower, I get it. If I had the ability to not smoke flower, then, you know, I would be smoking like full melt all day, any day, right? But go to my website, which I'll send a link in, and grade a flower. And I'm trying to get your input for a particular flower and how you grade it. And if we find alignment, because calibration is so important. The experience that you have. When I first experienced what a quad flower was, I was like, whoa, my life has changed. And then onto the next quad, I'm like, whoa, 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 whoa. That one I thought was a quad is really a trip, right? And so your journey really begins that way. So I definitely respect all of the legends and the people that have done all that work, because the only way to do it is through experience, right? There's no shortcut to it. So that just brings it up to what I wanted to say, Marcus.
Thank you.
And you are amazing.
Well, thanks for sharing, Julie. I appreciate that. It has been a good long hash church. We've been going for 3 hours, and although I really want to continue the conversation, I also want to go celebrate my wife's birthday, which is today. And we've been together for like 32 years, 27 years married in a week here. So I'm going to take her for a nice veggie sandwich down in the city. But I will invite all of you back next Sunday. This is a sacrifice for me, as I am sure it is for you. But if you guys can make it, we can talk about all of these things. I think there's a lot more to talk about. Mark Lewis from NAPRO apologized, said he'd be a lot less busy after MJ Biz. I really want to get him into the conversation with you, Nick. I think that would be explosive and incredible. And I do appreciate everyone for coming on and sharing with us here on Hash Church. I have a deep respect for all of you for certain. And the people, I'll be honest, you know, this conversation today and having Hash Church for like maybe the third week in a row, we had 353 people watching at once today, and we haven't broken 300 in quite some time. So thanks, everybody. And as long as I'm not frozen, am I?
Nope,
Oh, you're good.
That's usually when you freeze.
Perfect. I can't see anyone's camera, so usually I can tell by that. My internet's a little off, but yeah. So I will post anyone that wants any information shared. I'll post it in the Hash Church group on Facebook. If you also have something that you want shared and you're not on Facebook, I can put it in the description of this video. Just send me a private message, whether it's, you know, Julie's Collector's Cup or the Hash Legends of Hash event or anything that anyone's working on or wants to be shared with. I'll put the NAPRO article in the description that I talked about, the 2 limonene. And we'll get back into this next week, I hope. And maybe if you guys can think, even on the panel, anyone that would appreciate being in this conversation that could really bring something to that next level. It's not that I don't want to be inclusive, but there's really, like, you guys are all special in your own right, and your passion and your knowledge and everything that you're doing is really what makes Hash Church special. And we had built something so special with Hash Church maybe 3 or 4 years ago that I want to bring it back to that and understand that this conversation that happens, these conversations that happen are shaping the industry and the community that we live in. So we do owe it to ourselves. We have a little bit of a responsibility to continue with that. So thank you all for coming. May the full melt bless your bowl sooner than later. And porch plants, no slouch. Peace out, everybody.
Thanks, Marcus. Congratulations.
Later, guys. Thank you, Marcus. Later, guys.
Bye-bye.